Good afternoon, everyone. I'm my fellow COO of the Aplma. Welcome to the Aplma and VMBA Vietnam Loan Market Conference. We have a full program for today, so we'll have to start at 2:30 p.m. sharp. So while everyone is settling in, please let us show you a short video clip of our 2024 Global Loan Market Summit. Thank you. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, APMA and VMBA members. I trust you found the video clip enjoyable. It was filmed at our 2024 Global Summit in Hong Kong. This summit is a flagship event on the APMA calendar. This year, it is set on the 26th and 27th February at the Grand Hyatt Hotel in Hong Kong. On the first day of the summit, we will also have our award ceremony on that evening. We have 32 awards, including deal awards and country awards. Of course, we have the Syndicated Loan House of Vietnam. So for those who are APLMA members, please remember to cast your votes through your company primary contact before this Friday. Your vote may make a difference on where your firm stands in the market. If you have any questions about the voting, we are very happy to answer your questions during the coffee break. Now, I have to quickly run through our house rules. There are only 4 points, so please bear with me as these are very important. First, we have a number of live polls after the coffee break, so please do get your mobile phone ready. We will show the questions and the QR code on the screen later. And of course, if you have any questions for the speakers, you may also submit them while scanning the QR code. Second, we will post some of the photos on LinkedIn this evening. If you have a LinkedIn account, please take some pictures and tag APMA in your post. Third, I want to stress the importance of keeping today's discussion confidential. May I kindly ask that all presentations and conversations remain private and not to be shared without the presenter's explicit consent. Finally, I want to remind everyone about the certificate of attendance. If you want to get a certificate, please remember to let our staff to scan your QR code on your name badge when you leave. Going back to today's conference, we are very excited to share that we have more than 200 registrations for today, which means we will have a packed full house, and there are some seats available in the front. So if you haven't got a seat, please do move forward. There's still a few seats in the front. For an important event like today, we truly rely on our speakers, sponsor, and our co-hosts to collaborate with us to make it happen. Each of them plays a crucial role at this event. So a big thank you goes out to our gold sponsor, Norton Rose Fulbright, and our partner, Vietnam Banks Association. Thank you very much. Now, before we have our first session of today's conference, may I now invite our CEO, Mr. James Hogan, to come up to the stage to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ivy. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It really is wonderful to see so many of you here today. As Ivy said, we have a full house, which is terrific, and we really appreciate your being able to come along. So I'm really delighted to welcome you all to APLMA's Vietnam Loan Market Conference. This is APLMA's first conference of 2025, and what better place or way to start off the new year. Ho Chi Minh City is always such an exciting, vibrant place to visit. It really is great to be back. And looking around the city these past couple of days, it's no wonder that Vietnam's tourism sector has been growing so strongly. The people, the hospitality, the culture are all fantastic. A big change, of course, over the last 12 months since our last conference in Ho Chi Minh City is the fact that Ho Chi Minh now has a metro system, a subway. So congratulations to all. It's a fantastic achievement and a really tangible sign of progress. So I would encourage all those visiting from overseas who haven't yet had the chance to check out the metro over the coming days. But it's not just tourism or infrastructure that's starting to show great signs of progress. Vietnam has also, of course, been attracting international investors in many sectors. Exports have surged. In fact, Vietnam is now the fastest growing economy in Southeast Asia, with government data showing growth of a little bit over 7% in 2024. So we really hope that today's conference will leave you with some rich ideas of the opportunities in this very dynamic market. The reason, though, we're all here today, of course, is because Vietnam is such an important part of the Asia-Pacific loan market. With the economy growing so strongly and another $38 billion worth of foreign direct investment committed in 2024, there's no doubt, no question, we'll see plenty of opportunities for financing. Some of the strongest themes relate to the energy transition, renewables, advanced electronics, where Vietnam continues to attract significant amounts of investment. And of course, we cannot ignore the growing demand for digital infrastructure as the use of AI expands. But at the same time, where there are opportunities, there are challenges. And perhaps one of the big questions for 2025 is whether Vietnam will be able to maintain its positive momentum in a more polarized geopolitical situation. There is, of course, some considerable uncertainty around tariffs under the new US administration and their impact on global trade. Vietnam has benefited tremendously from the realignment of global supply chains over the years, and we very much hope this will continue to be the case in the future. There are also challenges around logistics, infrastructure, and a complex regulatory landscape here in Vietnam. So what does all this mean for the loan market? We think there are a number of key questions to be addressed. How can we increase lending opportunities here in Vietnam? How can we encourage greater risk sharing and syndication in the Vietnamese market? How do we deepen the supply of infrastructure projects and accelerate Vietnam's energy transition? How can the loan market better facilitate outbound investments from Vietnam? And for us at the APLMA, how can we best support Vietnamese banks or the many other loan providers to capitalize and support the country's rapid economic growth? And no question, there are many Vietnamese banks where we see terrific innovation and progress, all of which bodes well for the future. In terms of these questions, we don't claim to have all the answers, but we are fortunate to have an excellent lineup of expert speakers here today to shed some light on where the market is headed over the near term and longer term. At this point, I would also like to acknowledge how grateful we are to the senior leadership of the Vietnam Banks Association for being here today and for the invaluable support of the VNBA in organizing and co-hosting today's conference with us. I would also like to sincerely thank today's gold sponsor, Norton Rose Fulbright, for their enthusiastic support, not just for today, but also for being a terrific partner in multiple initiatives around the region. We greatly appreciate. Vietnam has been a key focus of the APLMA for a long time now. We held our inaugural Vietnam Loan Market Conference back in 2008, 17 years ago, and it has become one of the most eagerly awaited and anticipated events on our calendar. As some of you have commented today, we are holding the conference a little bit earlier than usual this year, but that's obviously because Tet and Lunar New Year are a little bit earlier this year. However, focusing on the loan market, as we continue to see growth and progress here in Vietnam, we all share the responsibility for ensuring that the market develops in a healthy and sustainable way. That is, after all, the core mission of the APLMA and has been since the association was founded back in 1998, to promote the development of the loan markets in terms of transparency, efficiency, and liquidity. The APLMA is committed to leading the conversation on the continued development of this market and supporting its growth with our resources and insights. We believe the APLMA has a unique role to play here. We serve members across the entire loan market and all of Asia Pacific. That leads us ideally and privileged to bring together participants from the full spectrum of the market at events like this one today, where we can plot and plan the best way forward. 2024, thanks to your support, everybody in this room, was a historic year for the APLMA. We had record attendance at our events across Asia Pacific, both in terms of the number of events and also the numbers of attendees at these events. Our membership, again thanks to your support, continues to broaden and diversify, and we continue to serve our members with our library of standard documentation templates, best practice guidelines, market updates, and educational materials. So, whether you're already an existing member of the APLMA or contemplating becoming a member, we encourage you all to engage with us and share your views on how we might best support you on the challenges and opportunities ahead. In this context, as a regular visitor to Vietnam over the past 35 years, I've always found people in Vietnam can be very forthcoming when it comes to sharing ideas and suggestions about how we might achieve greater progress together, and I hope that will continue to be the case. So, to conclude, like everybody in the room today, I'm really eager to see how the Vietnam loan market continues to develop in 2025 and beyond. From an APLMA perspective, we're looking forward to continuing to work with you all to promote the continued growth of the entire loan market. And in terms of more regular visits to Vietnam, we're very excited to continue to contribute more to the rapid growth in international travel numbers in the very near future and to doing more in Vietnam. On that note, I'm now going to hand over to the experts who've so kindly joined us today to help us understand more about what the year ahead has in store. Many thanks to you all for being here today. We wish you all the very best for the year ahead, and more immediately to today, we hope you find today's sessions informative and enjoyable. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you, James, for the very warm opening message. It gives me great pleasure to invite our co-host, Mr. Wing Hon Ming, Head of Ho Chi Minh City Representative Office of VNBA, to give us a warm welcome. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Mr. Ming to take the stage, please. Thank you.
thưa các vị lãnh đạo Hiệp hội Thị trường cho vay châu Á Thái Bình Dương, kính thưa quý vị đại biểu, kính thưa toàn thể hội nghị. Lời đầu tiên, thay mặt cho Hiệp hội Ngân hàng Việt Nam, cho phép tôi gửi lời chào mừng nồng nhiệt nhất đến với tất cả quý đại biểu tham dự hội nghị Thị trường cho vay Việt Nam năm 2025 ngày hôm nay. Đây là lần thứ 6 Hiệp hội Ngân hàng Việt Nam phối hợp cùng với Hiệp hội Thị trường cho vay châu Á Thái Bình Dương Aplma tổ chức hội nghị với mục tiêu chính là cung cấp thông tin, cập nhật cho các ngân hàng trong nước và những người tham gia vào thị trường cho vay về thị trường cho vay Việt Nam và xu hướng phát triển, cơ hội thị trường mới nhất tại thị trường cho vay Đông Nam Á. Nhân đây, tôi cũng xin trân trọng gửi lời cảm ơn tới Aplma đã có lời mời Hiệp hội Ngân hàng Việt Nam tiếp tục tham gia và phối hợp tổ chức sự kiện này. Xin trân trọng các quý vị đại biểu đã tham dự hội nghị và chúc sự kiện của chúng ta thành công tốt đẹp. Kính thưa quý vị đại biểu, năm 2024, kinh tế Việt Nam tăng trưởng tích cực với các động lực chính là sản xuất công nghiệp, thu hút và giải ngân FDI. Bên cạnh đó, xuất khẩu, du lịch phục hồi khả quan, lạm phát được kiểm soát phù hợp với mục tiêu được đề ra. So với các nước trên thế giới, Việt Nam là một điểm sáng về kiểm soát lạm phát, ổn định kinh tế vĩ mô, góp phần thu hút vốn FDI. Năm 2024, GDP của Việt Nam tăng trưởng ấn tượng và đạt 7,09%, với vượt mục tiêu là 6,5% đã đề ra ngay từ đầu năm. Trong bối cảnh kinh tế vĩ mô có nhiều tín hiệu tích cực, khởi sắc, tăng trưởng tín dụng của hệ thống ngân hàng Việt Nam thuận lợi hơn so với năm 2023 và tính đến 31 tháng 12 năm 2024, dư nợ tín dụng đối với nền kinh tế cũng đạt trên 15,61 triệu tỷ đồng với tốc độ tăng trưởng đạt 15,08% so với cuối năm 23 và tốc độ tăng trưởng tín dụng năm 23 là 13,78%. Bên cạnh những thuận lợi và kết quả đạt được trong năm 2024, Việt Nam phải đối mặt với nhiều khó khăn và chịu ảnh hưởng nặng nề của biến đổi khí hậu, của thiên tai, của ô nhiễm môi trường. Việt Nam cần một lượng vốn rất lớn để đầu tư vào các lĩnh vực xanh như là năng lượng tái tạo, chuyển đổi năng lượng, xử lý chất thải, v.v. Theo ước tính của IDB, để đạt được các mục tiêu về tăng trưởng xanh, Việt Nam cần một nguồn lực rất lớn, khoảng 368 tỷ đô la Mỹ cho cả giai đoạn đến năm 2040 và tương đương là 20 tỷ đô la Mỹ mỗi năm. Trong thời gian qua, hoạt động hợp tác quốc tế huy động nguồn lực từ nước ngoài phục vụ nhu cầu vốn phát triển kinh tế xanh và bền vững đã được các tổ chức tín dụng chú trọng và đẩy mạnh. Qua đó, nhiều thỏa thuận hợp tác, hỗ trợ từ các tổ chức tài chính nước ngoài cho tăng trưởng xanh, cho phát triển bền vững đã được ký kết. Điển hình là BIDV đã 2 đợt phát hành trái phiếu xanh và trái phiếu bền vững trong 2 năm liên tiếp. Tổng giá trị chào bán thành công của BIDV là 5.500 tỷ đồng. Của Vietcombank cũng đã phát hành thành công 2.000 tỷ đồng trái phiếu xanh để cho vay các dự án thuộc lĩnh vực bảo vệ môi trường và dự án mang lại lợi ích về môi trường. Gần đây, HD Bank cũng vừa trở thành một trong những ngân hàng tư nhân đầu tiên tại Việt Nam phát hành thành công 3.000 tỷ trái phiếu xanh cho các dự án có lợi ích cho môi trường và phát triển kinh tế xanh. Bên cạnh trái phiếu xanh, thời gian qua, các ngân hàng cũng tích cực huy động nguồn vốn từ các định chế tài chính lớn như World Bank, IFC, IDB, v.v. để thực hiện cho vay các dự án xanh. Điển hình là IFC cũng đã có khoản đầu tư 150 triệu đô la Mỹ trái phiếu xanh cho Sibank và hợp tác với VPBank triển khai chương trình tài trợ chuỗi cung ứng trị giá 30 triệu đô la Mỹ hỗ trợ cho các doanh nghiệp xuất nhập khẩu. Ngoài ra, các tổ chức tài chính quốc tế như IDB, World Bank cũng đang tích cực hỗ trợ Việt Nam trong việc phát triển các dự án xanh thông qua các khoản vay ưu đãi và hỗ trợ kỹ thuật. Kính thưa tất cả quý vị đại biểu, năm 2025, tình hình kinh tế thế giới và Việt Nam vẫn còn nhiều khó khăn, phức tạp, thách thức và thuận lợi đan xen. Căng thẳng địa chính trị leo thang ở nhiều khu vực, chủ nghĩa bảo hộ thương mại gia tăng và biến đổi khí hậu ngày càng khốc liệt là những yếu tố bất ổn hàng đầu có thể làm gia tăng lạm phát và kiềm hãm tăng trưởng kinh tế toàn cầu. Về kinh tế thế giới, IMF đã dự báo kinh tế thế giới duy trì ở mức tăng là 3,2%, bằng với năm 2024, và lạm phát tiếp tục giảm. Dự báo lạm phát toàn cầu năm 2025 là 4,3%, trong đó các nước phát triển giảm về quanh mục tiêu là 2%. Về kinh tế Việt Nam, một số tổ chức quốc tế như IMF, ADB, World Bank dự báo tăng trưởng GDP của Việt Nam năm 2025 ở mức là 6,1 tới 7% và lạm phát ở mức 3,3 đến 4,2%. Trong bối cảnh toàn cầu và Việt Nam đang ngày càng chú trọng đến phát triển bền vững và bảo vệ môi trường, sản xuất xanh đã trở thành một xu hướng tất yếu. Vốn tín dụng ngân hàng không chỉ giúp doanh nghiệp đầu tư vào công nghệ xanh mà còn hỗ trợ phát triển bền vững cho nền kinh tế. Bên cạnh việc tăng cường ứng dụng công nghệ và chuyển đổi số vào quy trình cấp tín dụng, thì việc tiết giảm chi phí, đa dạng hóa các nguồn vốn, tìm kiếm nguồn vốn đầu vào giá rẻ hơn thị trường quốc tế, giảm mặt bằng lãi suất cho vay, v.v. sẽ giúp các tổ chức tín dụng nâng cao được hiệu quả hoạt động và góp phần hỗ trợ doanh nghiệp tăng trưởng kinh tế. Hiệp hội Ngân hàng Việt Nam với tư cách là hội viên của Aplma mong rằng hội nghị ngày hôm nay sẽ đem lại nhiều thông tin cập nhật bổ ích cho các đại biểu đến từ các ngân hàng, các định chế tài chính của Việt Nam và châu Á Thái Bình Dương, những người rất quan tâm và tham gia vào thị trường cho vay Việt Nam. Thay mặt Hiệp hội Ngân hàng Việt Nam, một lần nữa chúng tôi xin kính chúc quý vị đại biểu sức khỏe, thành đạt, chúc sự kiện của chúng ta thành công tốt đẹp. Xin trân trọng cảm ơn.
Thank you, Mr. Ming, for the very informative session. It now gives me great pleasure great honor to introduce our next speaker. She has over 30 years of banking experience in Vietnam. She leads the client coverage and product teams focused on driving the growth strategy for banks, clients, shareholders, and committees. She is also working closely with Vietnam government bodies and market participants to implement the JETP and contribute to deliver the commitment of Vietnam in achieving net zero emissions by 2050. She has held various important positions in Standard Chartered Bank, including head of financial institutions in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. She's also the deputy director and head of international corporate and financial institution, head of commercial banking, head of CIB clients coverage, and now she's the CEO and head of corporate and investment banking Vietnam of Standard Chartered Bank. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome the CEO of Standard Chartered Bank Vietnam, Ms. Nguyễn Thuy Han, to deliver the keynote speech. Thank you, Ms. Han.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon to everyone. It is my great pleasure to be here today and share my perspectives at Vietnam Loan Market Conference in 2025. First and foremost, I would like to extend my gratitude to the organizer, Aplma, VBA, sponsors, participants, and lenders who made this event possible. Vietnam loan market, being critical component of our economy, has its own set of challenges and opportunities, as you have heard from our previous speakers. Therefore, it is a great opportunity for all of us to gather here today and share expertise, exchange best practices of sustainable growth of the loan market in Vietnam. As you all aware, in 2024, Vietnam achieved robust GDP growth of about 7.1%, successfully overcame various challenges such as global economic slowdown, political changes in Vietnam, natural disasters, weakening Vietnamese dong. The country once again demonstrated, its resilience and set a strong foundations for 2025. We expect increased, economic activities and forecast a strong GDP growth at the same level in 2025. Overall, Vietnamese onshore and offshore loan markets has demonstrated remarkable growth in the past 4 years. Offshore loan, both syndicated loan and the corp loans, grew by about 22% per year for the past years. However, from 2020 to 2023, we actually also have witnessed the significant decline from $2.8 billion in 2024 as the result of sustained, in elevated USD rate. This decline stems from higher base interest rate and also a shift from borrower preference in borrowing from BND with much lower all-in borrowing costs. Additionally, borrowers in 2024 also have taken quite conservative approach versus volatilities of the global market also. Syndicated loan, onshore and offshore, is especially pivotal to Vietnam loan market. By tapping into international loan market, Vietnamese borrowers can secure funding at more efficient only borrowing costs. I would not say cheaper because it depends on the rates market onshore and offshore. So borrowers will select the optimal borrowing cost for them at certain point in time. Amidst of this dynamic landscape, Standard Chartered has opportunity to lead 4 out of 12 landmark transactions in 2024 across financial institutions, non-bank financial institutions, and also corporate in various economic sectors such as manufacturing, trading, agriculture, retail. Each fundraising reflects the resilience, ambitions, and innovation of Vietnam's corporates. We're very proud to be an active lender in this market and look forward to building this momentum to support even greater milestones ahead in 2025. As we head into 2025, I actually would like to share, a little bit about the possible opportunities for Standard Chartered and all of us here today. So first, we actually have seen a wave of transformative infrastructure projects, including the expansions of highways that cross the country, upgrades of the major airports, an advancement in telecommunications, and infrastructure to support Vietnam's digital economy. Secondly, increasing financing demands from Vietnam emerging middle class that projected to account for more than 50% of the population from now until 2030. Thirdly, a gradually recovering of Vietnam real estate sector. As you see, this sector actually requires significant medium and long-term financing, which very much, stronger home buyer confidence and increasing demand for residential and mixed-use properties. But of course, you are all also aware that the recovery of the real estate sector only truly coming back if the government of Vietnam work out a procedures in which they accelerate the approving processes in the country. As the economy grows, Vietnam risk company also explore opportunities to tap into new markets and access a broader customer base. Such ambitions require financing, backing, and expertise as well, particularly offshore financing. This will require them to establish the relationship with international bankers, with us, as many of you are actually representing here today. especially for companies, as I mentioned earlier, who have ambition to grow their business not just domestically but also globally. And we actually had the privilege to work with you, for one of the transactions in 2024 for such company. Furthermore, I think, Phoebe, I also mentioned earlier about the green financing. And we have seen, increasingly interest and demand in raising green loans, social loan, and especially for the sustainability linked loan. And we hope that we will work together with all of you to push this forward for 2025. So I would urge all of you, if you have any transactions require financing, please help the clients and market participants to make it sustainable transactions. As you all are aware, our Prime Minister Phạm Minh Chính has set the country very aggressive GDP growth in 2025. We, the government is expecting to exceed 8% in 2025, and as one of the, Vietnamese, I'm confident that the country will be able to achieve that. And to support that, the State Bank of Vietnam also has set very aggressive the credit growth for 2025, and it is at 16% as of now. But as one of the lenders, we actually trying very hard to push it even beyond 16% in 2025. With 120 years of presence in Vietnam, Standard Chartered fully committed supporting long-term growth of the economy, especially the development of the global trade network, development of resilient financial market, and advancement of the sustainable economic growth in Vietnam. As we conclude, I would like to reaffirm Standard Chartered's strong optimism about the prospect of Vietnam loan market for the year ahead. And we're excited to partner with all of you to really grow this market sustainably in 2025 and beyond. Together, I'm very confident that we will win the progresses that we have made and navigate all the challenges, ahead of 2025. And we will be able together to materialize immense opportunities in this thriving market in Vietnam. So I wish all of you a very good luck for 2025 and looking forward to working closely with all of you to continue growing the loan market in Vietnam. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Han, for setting the scene for today's conference. Our next speaker, Ms. Tan Thi Tan Dong, Deputy Director, General Department of Credit and for Economic Sectors, State Bank of Vietnam, will share her insights for navigating the bankability challenges for sustainable infrastructure in Vietnam and beyond. We are delighted to have Ms. Dong here today. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Ms. Dong to take the stage, please. Thank you.
Kính thưa ông James Hogan, Giám đốc điều hành của Hiệp hội cho vay châu Á Thái Bình Dương, kính thưa ông Nguyễn Hoàng Minh, trưởng ban đại diện của Hiệp hội Ngân hàng Việt Nam tại thành phố Hồ Chí Minh, kính thưa tất cả các quý đại biểu, thì ban tổ chức thì có đề nghị tôi là chia sẻ một số thông tin liên quan đến công tác điều hành giải pháp về thúc đẩy tăng trưởng tín dụng xanh tại Việt Nam để góp phần thực hiện chiến lược quốc gia về tăng trưởng xanh. Thế thì hôm nay tại cái hội thảo về đánh giá về thị trường cho vay thì tôi xin phép là được chia sẻ thêm một số những cái thông tin về công tác điều hành chính sách tiền tệ tín dụng của Ngân hàng Nhà nước Việt Nam trong năm 2024 để góp phần hỗ trợ cho tăng trưởng kinh tế, để các quý vị đại biểu có thêm những cái thông tin cho những cái quyết định về đầu tư tại Việt Nam trong thời gian tới. Thế thì kính thưa quý vị đại biểu, Trong năm 2024 thì Quốc hội Việt Nam thì có đặt ra cái mục tiêu tăng trưởng kinh tế là từ 6 đến 6,5%. Thế thì tại Việt Nam thì cái nguồn lực tín dụng phải nói rằng là một trong những nguồn lực rất là quan trọng để góp phần hỗ trợ tăng trưởng kinh tế, bởi vì là cái tỷ trọng mà tỷ lệ mà tín dụng so với GDP thì hiện nay thì nó đâu đó rơi vào khoảng 133%. Như vậy là cái nguồn lực tín dụng của hệ thống ngân hàng có một cái vai trò rất là quan trọng trong hỗ trợ tăng trưởng kinh tế. Thế thì năm 2024 thì trên cơ sở mục tiêu tăng trưởng kinh tế mà Quốc hội giao thì Ngân hàng Nhà nước Việt Nam cũng đã xác định cái tốc độ tăng trưởng, cái tỷ trọng tăng trưởng tín dụng của hệ thống ngân hàng là khoảng 15%. Và Ngân hàng Nhà nước Việt Nam thì trong năm 2024 thì cũng đã có những cái đổi mới trong cái điều hành tăng trưởng tín dụng, là sẽ giao toàn bộ những cái chỉ tiêu tăng trưởng này cho các tổ chức tín dụng ngay từ đầu năm, để các tổ chức tín dụng là chủ động cho vay. Thế bên cạnh đó thì với cái đặc thù của nền kinh tế Việt Nam là nền kinh tế mở, trong cái bối cảnh rất nhiều khó khăn về địa chính trị cũng như là ảnh hưởng của thương mại thế giới, ảnh hưởng đến cái hoạt động kinh tế của quốc gia Việt Nam. Do vậy mà cái mục tiêu của Ngân hàng Nhà nước trong năm 2024 là phải điều hành chính sách tiền tệ cũng như là điều hành chính sách tiền tệ tín dụng là hướng tới hỗ trợ cho sản xuất kinh doanh và hỗ trợ cho khách hàng. Chính vì vậy mà cái việc điều hành chính sách tiền tệ lãi suất trong năm 2024 là Ngân hàng Nhà nước hoàn toàn là điều hành chính sách tiền tệ theo xu hướng giảm dần, và cái không tăng các cái mức lãi suất điều hành và giữ nguyên các mức lãi suất điều hành. Đồng thời là cũng chỉ đạo các cái tổ chức tín dụng là phải giảm lãi suất cho vay để hỗ trợ cho khách hàng cho vay. Thì chúng tôi thấy rằng là trong năm 2024 thì cái bình quân cái mức lãi suất cho vay các cái khoản phát sinh mới của các tổ chức tín dụng tại Việt Nam thì đã giảm 0,6% so với cuối năm 2023. Và với cái điều hành tăng trưởng tín dụng của Ngân hàng Nhà nước Việt Nam thì chúng tôi cũng yêu cầu là các định hướng cho các tổ chức tín dụng là phải hướng tín dụng vào các cái lĩnh vực sản xuất kinh doanh, lĩnh vực ưu tiên và các động lực tăng trưởng theo chỉ đạo của chính phủ. Đồng thời thì chúng tôi cũng đã có những cái triển khai các cái chương trình tín dụng mà hỗ trợ tháo khó khăn cho khách hàng. Ví dụ như là chắc là quý vị cũng đã nghe thì cái gói tín dụng về nhà ở là 120.000 tỷ đồng, và tiếp đó là chúng tôi cũng đã mở rộng cho các ngân hàng theo cái nguyện vọng đăng ký ngân hàng. Hiện nay cái gói này là 145.000 tỷ. Hay là chúng tôi cũng triển khai cái gói tín dụng liên quan đến hỗ trợ cho cái ngành lâm sản và thủy sản, cũng là một trong hai cái ngành mà xuất khẩu trọng điểm của Việt Nam. Thì chúng tôi có cái gói tín dụng từ triển khai từ năm 2023. Đầu tiên là 15.000 tỷ đồng và sau đó chúng tôi mở rộng quy mô lên 30.000 tỷ đồng và hiện nay là lên 60.000 tỷ đồng. Và đặc biệt là trong năm 2024 thì để hưởng ứng cái chủ trương về việc chuyển đổi sản xuất theo hướng xanh thì ngành ngân hàng cũng đã phối hợp với Bộ Nông nghiệp là triển khai cái đề án về 1 triệu hecta lúa phát thải thấp vùng đồng bằng sông Cửu Long. Thì đây là một cái dự án mà có liên quan cũng có sự hỗ trợ của World Bank để chỉ thấy rằng là sản xuất lúa của Việt Nam, một trong những mặt hàng trọng điểm, nông nghiệp trọng điểm Việt Nam thì cũng đang chuyển đổi, và chúng tôi cũng sẽ nỗ lực để thực hiện cái đề án này thành công. Thế thì với những cái việc điều hành chính sách tiền tệ tín dụng của Ngân hàng Trung ương như vậy thì chúng tôi thấy rằng là cái kết quả tín dụng trong năm 2024 thì cái quy mô tín dụng là chúng tôi đạt được là 15,61 triệu tỷ đồng và tăng 15,08%. Cái mức này thì vượt cái con số, cái định hướng 15% ngay từ đầu năm của Ngân hàng Nhà nước. Và chúng tôi thấy rằng là cái xét về mặt thời hạn cho vay thì cái dư nợ tín dụng ngắn hạn thì chúng tôi thấy rằng là đang có xu hướng gia tăng, và cái tỷ trọng tín dụng chung dài hạn thì có xu hướng chậm lại. Tín dụng đối với các ngành kinh tế thì tín dụng của ngành ngân hàng cho cái lĩnh vực nông lâm thủy sản thì đạt gần 7%. Trong khi đó thì tín dụng cho ngành công nghiệp và xây dựng thì đạt chiếm tỷ trọng là 25% trong tổng dư nợ, và tín dụng cho ngành thương mại dịch vụ thì chiếm khoảng 68%. Thì đó là về cơ cấu tín dụng. Đối với cái 5 lĩnh vực ưu tiên theo chỉ đạo của chính phủ mà ngành ngân hàng cần phải tập trung tín dụng thì chúng tôi thấy là cũng rất là khá. Tăng trưởng tín dụng vào các lĩnh vực này cũng rất là khá. Các tổ chức tín dụng cũng đã hưởng ứng các chủ trương của chính phủ và cũng tập trung trong các lĩnh vực này. Tín dụng cho nông nghiệp nông thôn thì cũng chiếm khoảng 24% trong tổng dư nợ nền kinh tế. Tín dụng đối với cái lĩnh vực doanh nghiệp nhỏ và vừa thì cũng chiếm khoảng 18%, và một số các cái lĩnh vực mà ưu tiên theo chỉ đạo của chính phủ thì mặc dù là tốc độ tỷ trọng thì vẫn còn là khiêm tốn, nhưng mà năm 2024 thì cũng ghi nhận là cái tốc độ tăng trưởng rất là khá. Ví dụ như là lĩnh vực ứng dụng công nghệ cao thì tăng lên 30%, hay là lĩnh vực công nghiệp hỗ trợ của Việt Nam thì tín dụng tăng gần 22%. Và đặc biệt là cái ngành bất động sản trong năm 2024 thì cũng có cái dấu hiệu là chững lại, tuy nhiên thì tín dụng cho lĩnh vực bất động sản thì cũng đạt gần 3,3 triệu tỷ đồng, cũng chiếm khoảng cái tỷ trọng là khoảng trên 21% trong tổng dư nợ nền kinh tế, và tăng gần 14%. Tín dụng phục vụ nhu cầu tiêu dùng của người dân thì đạt 3,2 triệu tỷ đồng và tăng khoảng 11%. Thì trong cái tín dụng phục vụ nhu cầu đời sống ấy, thì có cái dư nợ mà cho vay cái nhà ở ấy thì cũng phải chiếm gần 59% trong tổng dư nợ. Thì đó là một số những cái kết quả về hoạt động tín dụng đối với các ngành lĩnh vực cũng như là tín dụng chung của nền kinh tế trong năm 2024. Cũng có thể thấy rằng là năm 2024 thì hệ thống các tổ chức tín dụng cũng đã tập trung để phát triển cái hoạt động cho vay để hỗ trợ tăng trưởng kinh tế theo chỉ đạo của chính phủ. Thì đó là một số những cái nét mà tôi xin phép chia sẻ qua về công tác điều hành chính sách tiền tệ tín dụng cũng như là kết quả đạt được của hệ thống ngân hàng trong năm 2024. Cái phần thứ hai mà tôi xin phép được chia sẻ đó là những cái giải pháp để thúc đẩy tín dụng xanh của Việt Nam. Thì chúng ta thấy rằng là như tôi đã nói ban đầu ấy, chia sẻ ban đầu thì cái nguồn lực của hệ thống ngân hàng thì hiện nay đóng một vai trò rất là quan trọng trong hỗ trợ tăng trưởng kinh tế của Việt Nam. Ngoài ra thì để chuyển đổi xanh của Việt Nam thì anh Minh ngay từ bài phát biểu thì cũng đã nói rằng là theo cái dự đoán của World Bank thì cái nguồn lực mà để chuyển đổi xanh của nền kinh tế Việt Nam đâu đó là khoảng 368 tỷ đô theo dự báo của World Bank. Tuy nhiên thì theo cái báo cáo gần nhất năm 2024 của Bộ Kế Đầu tư ấy, thì dự kiến rằng cái nguồn lực mà để hỗ trợ cho chuyển đổi xanh của Việt Nam thì nó sẽ phải rơi vào tầm khoảng 871 tỷ đô. Con số đã cao hơn rất nhiều. Trong khi đó thì cái nguồn lực tín dụng như tôi cũng đã báo cáo các quý vị ban đầu ấy ạ, là nguồn lực tín dụng thì lúc nào cũng chiếm cái tỷ trọng từ 125 đến khoảng trên 130% trong tổng GDP. Như vậy là chúng ta thấy rằng là để phát triển chuyển đổi xanh của Việt Nam thì một trong những nguồn lực rất là quan trọng là thông qua nguồn lực ngân hàng. Thế thì ngay từ những năm 2018, 17, 18 thì ngành ngân hàng cũng xác định rằng là ngành ngân hàng cũng phải là chuyển đổi để đáp ứng cái nhu cầu cho chuyển đổi xanh của nền kinh tế. Thì thời điểm này thì Ngân hàng Nhà nước cũng đã xây dựng những cái đề án chiến lược lồng ghép những yêu cầu về chuyển đổi xanh trong hoạt động ngân hàng. Chẳng hạn như năm 2018 thì chúng tôi cũng đã có những đề án về ngân hàng xanh. Hay tiếp theo đó thì chúng tôi cũng có đề án về phát triển ngành ngân hàng thì cũng lồng ghép các yêu cầu về tăng trưởng cái dư nợ tín dụng đối với các ngành xanh trong cái tổng dư nợ của hệ thống ngân hàng, mà tập trung chính vào cho các lĩnh vực như là năng lượng tái tạo, các ngành sản xuất và tiêu dùng ít carbon, các cái ngành kinh tế mà có lợi ích về môi trường. Hay là năm 2023 thì khi mà ban hành cái đề án về tái cơ cấu lại hệ thống các tổ chức tín dụng ấy, thì Ngân hàng Nhà nước cũng đặt ra các vấn đề yêu cầu các tổ chức tín dụng là trong quá trình xây dựng lại các cái đề án về tái cơ cấu của tổ chức tín dụng mình thì cũng đặt vấn đề là phải tăng cái tỷ trọng cho vay đối với các ngành xanh và phải thực hiện quản lý rủi ro về môi trường và xã hội trong hoạt động cấp tín dụng. Đồng thời thì Ngân hàng Nhà nước trên cơ sở chiến lược quốc gia về tăng trưởng xanh các cái giai đoạn như là giai đoạn 2011-2020 hay là gần đây nhất là theo quyết định 1658 của Thủ tướng Chính phủ về chiến lược quốc gia về tăng trưởng xanh giai đoạn 2021-2030 và tầm nhìn 2050. Thì để triển khai các cái đề án này, chiến lược này của quốc gia thì Ngân hàng Nhà nước cũng đã ban hành cái kế hoạch hành động của ngành ngân hàng. Trong đó cũng đề ra các cái giải pháp rất là rõ ràng cho các cơ quan, đơn vị của Ngân hàng Nhà nước là các đơn vị mà tham mưu chính sách, cũng có những cái giải pháp về điều hành chính sách tiền tệ, hoàn thiện các khuôn khổ pháp lý hay là huy động các nguồn lực Rồi cũng có những cái giải pháp về phía các tổ chức tín dụng là phải xây dựng các kế hoạch kinh doanh trong cái đề án cũng như là trong cái kế hoạch kinh doanh của mình cũng phải lồng ghép cái chiến lược xanh. Và cũng có những cái kế hoạch cụ thể về việc là tăng cái tỷ trọng cho vay các ngành xanh, và các ngân hàng thì cũng phải có những cái báo cáo công bố phát triển bền vững của ngân hàng mình. Thì đó là những cái kế hoạch hành động của ngân hàng để thực hiện chiến lược quốc gia về tăng trưởng xanh. Thì bên cạnh những cái đề án chiến lược định hướng hoạt động của ngành ngân hàng thì ngân hàng nhà nước cũng đã ban hành những cái văn bản chỉ đạo rất là cụ thể. Chẳng hạn từ năm 2015 thì chúng tôi đã ban hành cái chỉ thị 03 là yêu cầu các tổ chức tín dụng là phải tăng cường cái cho vay các ngành xanh hay là phải quản lý rủi ro môi trường xã hội. Và tiếp theo đó thì chúng tôi cũng ban hành 12 cái ngành xanh năm 2017 để các tổ chức tín dụng là tập trung nguồn lực để cho vay các ngành xanh này. Và đặc biệt là trong năm 2022 thì chúng tôi cũng đã ban hành cái thông tư 17 để hướng dẫn các tổ chức tín dụng là quản lý rủi ro về môi trường đối với 3 cái nhóm dự án mà có tác động đến môi trường theo cái luật bảo vệ môi trường. Thì đó là những cái văn bản mà chúng tôi thấy rằng là ngân hàng nhà nước từ năm 2018 đến nay đã có những cái bước đi rất là rõ ràng, là đi từ định hướng cho các tổ chức tín dụng là nâng cao nhận thức về việc chuyển đổi xanh, rồi đến có những văn bản về mặt quy phạm như là thông tư 17 là yêu cầu các tổ chức tín dụng là phải thực hiện tuân thủ pháp luật về môi trường. Thì nó cũng là một cái bước đi và tạo cái thời gian thuận lợi cho các tổ chức tín dụng là tiếp cận cũng như là chuyển đổi cái hoạt động của mình. Ngoài ra thì chúng tôi cũng đã phối hợp với cả các bộ ngành là trên cơ sở đề nghị của các tổ chức quốc tế hay là các tổ chức tín dụng thì cũng đã có những cái thư để xác định về việc phản đối hay không phản đối cho các tổ chức tín dụng khi mà hợp tác với các tổ chức quốc tế như IFC hay là ADB hay là AIIB trong việc là đầu tư vào các ngành lĩnh vực rồi thì cơ sở hạ tầng mà nó có cái yếu tố tác động đến môi trường. Thì đó là những cái giải pháp về phía ngành ngân hàng trong thời gian vừa qua để thúc đẩy cái hoạt động tín dụng xanh. Và chúng tôi thấy rằng là qua quá trình theo dõi thì với những cái kết quả, với những cái định hướng điều hành của ngân hàng nhà nước trong thời gian vừa qua thì chúng tôi thấy rằng là các tổ chức tín dụng thì rất là chủ động và rất tích cực trong việc chuyển đổi, vì rõ ràng là chúng ta phải thấy rằng là chúng ta sống trong cái môi trường là hội nhập và toàn thế giới là chuyển đổi, thì các tổ chức tín dụng tại Việt Nam bao gồm cả các cái tổ chức có vốn nước ngoài hay là những tổ chức trong nước thì cũng đều nhận thức rất là rõ ràng về việc là cần phải chuyển đổi để hướng tới cái tài trợ cho các dự án xanh để có thể là tồn tại và phát triển một cách bền vững. Thì chúng tôi thấy rằng là đến cuối năm 2024 thì cũng đã có 50 tổ chức tín dụng là cũng đã phát sinh dư nợ cho vay đối với 12 ngành xanh mà ngân hàng nhà nước đã ban hành từ năm 2017 ấy, với cái dư nợ tín dụng xanh là đạt khoảng 665.000 tỷ đồng và nó chiếm cái tỷ trọng khoảng 4,5% trong tổng dư nợ nền kinh tế. Và các tổ chức tín dụng thì cũng đã tích cực là thực hiện cái quản lý rủi ro môi trường và xã hội theo yêu cầu của ngân hàng nhà nước. Và cái số mà các cái tổ chức tín dụng thực hiện quản lý rủi ro môi trường và xã hội nó cũng có khoảng hiện nay là có khoảng 55 tổ chức tín dụng đã thực hiện quản lý rủi ro về môi trường và xã hội. Như vậy là nếu như xét đến các yếu tố về thực hiện các cái yếu tố về môi trường hay là gọi là chúng ta đánh đồng là gọi là thực hiện cái hoạt động về cho vay xanh của ngành ngân hàng thì cái dư nợ mà có yếu tố xanh hay là dư nợ mà cấp tín dụng cho các ngành xanh của ngân hàng, của hệ thống ngân hàng hiện nay cũng chiếm đâu đó khoảng gần 30% trong tổng dư nợ, bao gồm cả các cái hoạt động về cấp tín dụng xanh cũng như là thực hiện quản lý rủi ro môi trường và xã hội trong hoạt động cấp tín dụng thì cũng chiếm cái tỷ trọng khoảng gần 30% trong cái tổng dư nợ nền kinh tế 15,61 triệu tỷ đồng. Thì đó là những kết quả mà chúng tôi thấy rằng là nếu như chúng tôi theo dõi từ năm 2017 đến nay ấy, thì trung bình là cái tốc độ tăng trưởng dư nợ xanh của hệ thống ngân hàng nó cũng đạt được cái con số là khoảng 21%. Tức là cái tốc độ tăng trưởng trung bình trong cái hoạt động cấp tín dụng xanh, và nó cao rất nhiều so với cái bình quân về tăng trưởng tín dụng của toàn hệ thống là 15% tính giai đoạn từ 2017 đến nay. Và rõ ràng là chúng tôi thấy rằng là cũng đã có rất nhiều các tổ chức tín dụng cũng đã chủ động, và cái con số mà cấp tín dụng xanh của hệ thống ngân hàng nếu như mà từ năm 2017 thì đâu đó có khoảng 15 tổ chức tín dụng là mới phát sinh cho vay xanh thì đến nay con số này đã là 50 tổ chức tín dụng. Điều đấy cho thấy rằng là các tổ chức tín dụng cũng chuyển đổi rất là nhanh và đã tích cực cấp tín dụng cho các cái ngành xanh theo các cái yêu cầu của khách hàng. Thì đó là những cái kết quả ban đầu mà chúng tôi đã đánh giá được, và cũng như báo cáo của anh Minh ngay cái bài phát biểu của mình là một số tổ chức tín dụng thì cũng đã chủ động hợp tác với tổ chức quốc tế và đã có huy động thành công các cái đợt phát hành trái phiếu xanh huy động quốc tế để cho cái lĩnh vực xanh. Thì chúng tôi cũng kỳ vọng rằng là trong các cái năm tới thì các tổ chức tín dụng cũng sẽ có những cái kết quả mà nó khởi sắc hơn rất là nhiều. Thế thì đó là những kết quả về hoạt động mà cấp tín dụng xanh. Thì chúng tôi thấy rằng là rõ ràng là về phía ngân hàng nhà nước và hệ thống các tổ chức tín dụng thì đã rất tích cực chuyển đổi. Tuy nhiên thì chúng tôi cũng thấy rằng là cái hoạt động cấp tín dụng xanh của hệ thống ngân hàng thì nó cũng đang còn một số những khó khăn vướng mắc, và cũng xin báo cáo với cả hội nghị là một số khó khăn vướng mắc mà chúng tôi cũng thấy rằng hiện nay là gì, là rõ ràng là cái con số mà 665.000 tỷ mà tôi vừa báo cáo với hội nghị, nó chiếm khoảng 4,5% trong tổng dư nợ nền kinh tế. Đó là tín dụng xanh thì nó đang thống kê dựa trên 12 ngành xanh mà do ngân hàng nhà nước cùng với các tổ chức GIZ ban hành vào năm 2017. Tuy nhiên đến nay thì tôi cho rằng là cái danh mục xanh thì nó không còn phù hợp nữa, bởi vì nó đã thời gian từ năm 2017 đến nay cũng đã 7 năm 8 năm rồi. Và ngành ngân hàng thì chúng tôi đang kỳ vọng ở một cái danh mục xanh quốc gia. Thế thì Chính phủ thì cũng đã có chỉ đạo là sẽ ban hành một cái danh mục xanh quốc gia ở Nghị định 08 năm 2022 để hướng dẫn luật bảo vệ môi trường. Và chúng tôi thì cũng đang kỳ vọng là Bộ Tài nguyên Môi trường thì cũng sớm trình Chính phủ để ban hành danh mục xanh. Thì đây cũng là một cái cơ sở để cho các tổ chức tín dụng cũng như là các nhà đầu tư nước ngoài cũng xác định xem được những cái ngành xanh mà mình cần đầu tư để làm cơ sở huy động vốn cũng như là cho vay của hệ thống ngân hàng. Cái thứ hai nữa là rõ ràng là đối với hệ thống ngân hàng thì cái nguồn lực để cho vay đối với ngành xanh thì nó cũng đang là một cái vấn đề rất là khó khăn, bởi vì là như tôi cũng đã báo cáo ban đầu là nếu như theo tính toán của Bộ Kế Đầu tư thì cái nguồn lực để cho chuyển đổi xanh của Việt Nam cũng như là thực hiện net zero theo cam kết của Thủ tướng Chính phủ tại COP26 thì cái nguồn lực của Việt Nam đang cần rất là lớn. Con số đến như Bộ Kế Đầu tư mà dự kiến tại cái báo cáo đánh giá về kế hoạch tăng trưởng xanh 2023 vừa rồi thì con số đó nó lên khoảng 871 tỷ đô. Thế thì nếu như con số này trong cái bối cảnh mà thị trường vốn của Việt Nam cũng chưa phải là thực sự phát triển, hay là những cái thị trường về giao dịch tín chỉ carbon nó cũng chưa được triển khai, thì rõ ràng là cái áp lực lên hệ thống ngân hàng cũng đang rất là lớn. Và như tôi báo cáo ban đầu với cái theo dõi cái kết quả hoạt động của ngân hàng thấy rằng là hiện nay thì cái dư nợ cho vay ngắn hạn nó đang chiếm tỷ trọng dần dần cao lên, và cái tín dụng cho vay chung dài hạn cũng đang là có xu hướng giảm dần, và các ngân hàng thì cũng đang phải tuân thủ theo cái quy định về việc là sử dụng vốn ngắn hạn cho vay chung dài hạn theo quy định của ngân hàng nhà nước để đảm bảo an toàn hệ thống. Thì rõ ràng là đối với các cái dự án xanh và có cái nhu cầu vốn lớn và thời gian dài thì để cung ứng được các nguồn vốn này thì rõ ràng là các ngân hàng hiện nay cũng đang làm cái khó khăn rất là lớn và đang cần cái nguồn lực mà dài hạn hơn, và cũng đang rất là cần những cái nguồn huy động tư nhân, nguồn đầu tư tư nhân quốc tế vào Việt Nam. Thế tuy nhiên thì rõ ràng là theo phản ánh của các tổ chức tín dụng thì cái nguồn này hiện nay trong bối cảnh này thì trong năm vừa qua thì cái mức giá vốn nó đang còn có cái mức giá vốn vẫn còn cao và chưa phù hợp, chưa hợp lý ở trong cái bối cảnh thị trường Việt Nam. Nếu như so sánh với việc phát hành trái phiếu chẳng hạn thì rõ ràng là cái nguồn lực mà huy động từ các nguồn tư nhân, mặc dù là nguồn này chúng tôi đang rất là cần về phía Việt Nam thì để hỗ trợ tăng trưởng kinh tế nó đang rất là cần nguồn lực. Tuy nhiên thì chúng tôi cũng mong muốn là có được huy động, hệ thống ngân hàng thì mong muốn là có huy động cái nguồn lực mà với giá vốn nó hợp lý hơn. Ngoài ra thì các tổ chức tín dụng cũng đang rất là khó khăn trong cái việc là phải đầu tư các công nghệ hay là hệ thống quản trị để thực hành ESG một cách hiệu quả hơn trong hệ thống ngân hàng, hay là cũng như là cái công tác mà đào tạo nguồn nhân lực. Thì chúng tôi thấy rằng là có một số ngân hàng hiện nay cũng đã chuyển đổi cái công tác là tuyển dụng cán bộ, cũng có những cái bên cạnh những cán bộ mà chuyên sâu về lĩnh vực tài chính thì cũng đã có những cái sự thay đổi về việc chuyển dịch là tuyển dụng những cán bộ mà có cái chuyên môn về môi trường trong việc là hỗ trợ cho ngân hàng xây dựng được cái hệ thống áp dụng cái thực thi ESG trong hoạt động ngân hàng. để cái hoạt động chuyển đổi xanh của ngân hàng được tốt hơn, hay là các ngân hàng thì cũng đang phải đối mặt với những cái khó khăn thách thức, bởi vì là khách hàng của các ngân hàng hiện nay, đối với những cái khách hàng mà đang có cái hoạt động về xuất nhập khẩu sang các cái thị trường châu Âu hoặc châu Mỹ, và từ năm 2026 đang phải áp dụng cái đạo luật CPAM ở châu Âu, hay là các đạo luật về carbon của châu Mỹ, thì cũng phải tuân thủ những cái yêu cầu về bảo vệ môi trường rất là khắt khe. Thì đối với hệ thống ngân hàng cũng phải hiểu được các quy định và cũng phải phối hợp cùng khách hàng để thực hiện được các cái quy định này, thì lúc đó cái hoạt động kinh doanh mới hiệu quả và nó mới đảm bảo được các cái hoạt động về cung ứng tài chính xanh nó mới hiệu quả cho hệ thống ngân hàng. Thì đó là những cái khó khăn mà chúng tôi thấy rằng là hệ thống ngân hàng thời gian vừa qua cũng đã tích cực và cũng đã có những kết quả rất là rõ nét, nhưng mà nó cũng đang phải có những thách thức rất là lớn để thực hiện cái chuyển đổi xanh trong hoạt động tài chính xanh của hệ thống ngân hàng. Thế thì trên cơ sở những khó khăn vướng mắc như vậy thì trong cái buổi hội thảo ngày hôm nay thì chúng tôi cũng có một số những cái đề xuất kiến nghị. Thì những cái nội dung này thì ngân hàng nhà nước thì cũng đã thường xuyên là có những đề xuất kiến nghị với các bộ ngành trong việc là cần phải khẩn trương là trình chính phủ, thủ tướng chính phủ ban hành để có một cái danh mục xanh quốc gia một cách rất là chính thống, để trên cơ sở đó thì các ngân hàng cũng đã chủ động, có cái sự chủ động trong việc là định hướng cái hoạt động kinh doanh của mình, hay là cũng là một cơ sở để cho các nhà đầu tư nước ngoài cũng có cái định hướng kinh doanh vào Việt Nam. Thế thì đối với các tổ chức tín dụng thì thời gian qua cũng đã rất là tích cực rồi, thì thời gian tới cũng sẽ tiếp tục sẽ tích cực hơn trong việc chủ động là thực hành đẩy mạnh cái hoạt động tín dụng xanh, cũng như là thực hành cái ESG trong hoạt động cấp tín dụng, hay là cũng là chủ động phối hợp với các tổ chức quốc tế để huy động những nguồn lực tốt hơn cho các cái nhu cầu đầu tư vốn. Bởi vì là trong năm 2025 thì cũng như là bài phát biểu của anh chị cũng đã phát biểu từ trước ạ, là Thủ tướng trong cái buổi họp làm việc thường trực chính phủ với các địa phương đầu tháng 1 vừa qua thì cũng đã đề ra là cái mục tiêu tăng trưởng kinh tế của Việt Nam năm 2025 là đạt 8% và sẽ có cố gắng đạt mức tăng cao hơn để hỗ trợ cho cái tăng trưởng tín dụng cho cả một giai đoạn. Thế thì chúng tôi cho rằng là chính phủ đã đặt ra mục tiêu 8% và quyết tâm đạt được của chính phủ là rất cao, và cái mục tiêu hướng đến cho các ngành để chuyển đổi xanh của Việt Nam, Thủ tướng Chính phủ vẫn đặt ra là gì? Vẫn là chuyển đổi xanh và chuyển đổi số, và vẫn là cho các cái động lực tăng trưởng kinh tế và các lĩnh vực ưu tiên. Và chúng tôi thấy rằng là một số những cái ngành mà có thể được coi là một trong cái động lực về chuyển đổi xanh như là năng lượng hay là lĩnh vực về nông nghiệp cũng vẫn là một trong những cái ngành mà là các cái ngành mà chính phủ cũng đang yêu cầu là phải tập trung nguồn lực hơn để đẩy mạnh hơn, bởi vì nó cũng là trong những cái ngành năng lượng, cũng là cái ngành năng lượng tái tạo, là cái ngành mà hỗ trợ chuyển đổi xanh Việt Nam rất lớn, hay ngành nông nghiệp là cái ngành mà mang lại những cái xuất khẩu cho Việt Nam, khẳng định cái giá trị của Việt Nam rất là lớn trên trường quốc tế. Thế thì các tổ chức tín dụng thì chúng ta cũng nắm được những cái chủ trương của chính phủ để tiếp tục định hướng cái kinh doanh của chúng ta trong năm tới. Về phía ngân hàng nhà nước thì chúng tôi về phía ngân hàng nhà nước thì trong năm 2025 thì chúng tôi cũng sẽ tiếp tục là điều hành rate tiền tệ chủ động và linh hoạt hơn, cũng như là sẽ giữ ổn định mặt bằng lãi suất để hỗ trợ cho các tổ chức tín dụng cũng như là khách hàng trong cái hoạt động tiếp cận tín dụng, hay là cái công tác điều hành tín dụng thì cũng sẽ tập trung vào các cái lĩnh vực ưu tiên, rồi thì các cái lĩnh vực mà là động lực tăng trưởng theo chỉ đạo của chính phủ. Và đặc biệt là chúng tôi cũng sẽ bám sát vào cái danh mục xanh của quốc gia để tiếp tục là sẽ có những cái hướng dẫn cụ thể hơn cho các tổ chức tín dụng trong hoạt động cấp tín dụng. Và đặc biệt là về phía ngân hàng nhà nước thì quý 1 năm 2025 thì chúng tôi cũng sẽ ban hành có một cái hướng dẫn các tổ chức tín dụng trong việc xây dựng các cái quy trình về quản lý rủi ro môi trường và xã hội trong hoạt động cấp tín dụng, cũng là một cái tài liệu để các tổ chức tín dụng tham khảo trong cái việc mà hoàn thiện quy định nội bộ của mình. Thì đó là những cái định hướng về phía ngân hàng nhà nước Việt Nam. Thì trong cái buổi hội thảo ngày hôm nay thì do Aplma cũng như là VNBA tổ chức, thì về phía ngân hàng nhà nước về vụ tín dụng thì chúng tôi cũng có một kiến nghị rất là nhỏ đối với cả hai hiệp hội. Là thời gian vừa qua thì tôi thấy rằng là hiệp hội cho vay, thị trường cho vay châu Á Thái Bình Dương cũng như là Hiệp hội Ngân hàng Việt Nam thì cũng đã tích cực tổ chức rất nhiều những cái hội thảo để chia sẻ kinh nghiệm. Thì tôi mong muốn là trong thời gian tới thì hai hiệp hội cũng sẽ tiếp tục phối hợp với nhau để tổ chức nhiều hơn nữa các buổi hội thảo cho các tổ chức tín dụng có cơ hội chia sẻ các cái học hỏi cũng như là có thêm thông tin về thị trường tiền tệ của châu Á Thái Bình Dương nói chung, cũng như là có thể có những nhận định đánh giá về thị trường cho vay của Việt Nam nó sát hơn, cũng là một cái tài liệu để các tổ chức tín dụng có thể là cái căn cứ để hoạch định cũng như là định hướng cái hoạt động kinh doanh của mình. Và đặc biệt là trong bài phát biểu của tôi thì tôi cũng có nói rằng là cái nguồn lực để hỗ trợ cho Việt Nam chuyển đổi xanh đáng ra là rất lớn, và bên cạnh cái hoạt động mà bên cạnh cái nguồn lực của hệ thống ngân hàng hay là cái nguồn lực về thị trường chứng khoán, thị trường vốn của Việt Nam thì chúng tôi cũng rất mong là hai hiệp hội cũng sẽ phối hợp để có thông tin đến các nhà đầu tư nước ngoài để có nhiều thông tin hơn về môi trường đầu tư của Việt Nam cũng như là định hướng phát triển kinh tế của Việt Nam, để cũng có các cơ sở để các nhà đầu tư là tìm hiểu và sẽ đầu tư tại Việt Nam được nhiều hơn, để từ đó thì cái hoạt động nó cũng sẽ mang tính chất hiệu quả hơn ạ. Và cuối cùng thì tôi xin phép được dừng bài phát biểu của mình tại đây và kính chúc hội nghị của chúng ta sức khỏe thành công, và chúc quý vị đại biểu là sức khỏe thành công và chúc hội nghị ta thành công rực rỡ. Xin cảm ơn.
Thank you, Ms. Dong, for the very informative session. We'll now pause for a short coffee break, so please feel free to swap business cards and let's regroup at 4:30 sharp to continue our conference. Thank you. In any form without the presenter's explicit consent. So while everyone is settling in, and those who are just coming in now, please do take a seat. While we're doing that, I do have a question for all of you. So could I ask everyone to please take out your mobile phones and scan the QR code displayed on the screen for me? So my question is, how many LinkedIn followers does Aplma have? Don't look it up online. Just have a guess. So, wow, okay. 9,000, anyone? 9,000 plus? So that's correct. We do have over 9,500 followers on LinkedIn. You know why I asked this question? The reason is because we are going to post discussion summaries on LinkedIn in around 2 weeks' time. So please do follow us. You will receive the notification and you can read the materials online. Here comes our first panel discussion of today, which will dive into the present dynamics of Vietnam's loan market and the environment for foreign investment in the country. So it's our great pleasure to have Ms. Suk Kenya, Director, Loan Syndications Investment Banking HSBC as the moderator. Joining her are Mr. Nathan Andrew Nelson, Regional Vice President, South and Southeast Asia Export Development Canada, Mr. Fan Hon Hai, Chief Executive Officer OCB, and Mr. Yo Yi Yap, Managing Director, Private Credit Citan Holdings. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our speakers. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Now I'm Kim from HSBC. Thank you so much for joining this conference today. I hope you had enough coffee just now so that I can stay awake for the next 45 minutes because we have very, very good speakers here with us today to share their insights with us on the topic we're going to discuss. Now, before we start, maybe I will just invite panelists to give a quick introduction of herself. Maybe let's start with Nathan.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you to APLMA and the other sponsors for having me on this panel. So my name is Nathan Nelson, and I'm the Regional Vice President for South and Southeast Asia, and I only arrived here in Vietnam about 7 months ago to open our representation here in Vietnam, covering South and Southeast Asia. Thank you.
Hi everyone, so my name is Kai. I'm the CEO of OCB on the local bank here. I've been working in bank industry in Vietnam for about 28 years. Previously, I worked for HSBC in Vietnam. Thank you.
Hi, my name is William. I'm the MD for Seatown. Currently, I'm managing the private credit fund for Seatown. We are managing two funds of about US 2.7 billion now, focusing on the Asia Pac. So for Vietnam, it's been quite a key market for us for private credit for the last 5 years.
Thank you. And I'm Siu King. I cover the syndication for Southeast Asia and India based in Singapore. Again, thank you. So let's get started. Now, I would like to direct the first question to Mr. Hai. How has the onshore loan market developed in 2024? And especially with the wide rate differentials between the onshore, offshore, and how has that influenced the offshore? So, if you could share a little bit of insight with us on that part.
So I think obviously the 2024 has been a very challenging year for Vietnam economy, also the banking sector as well. But from the borrower perspective, I would say that I think borrower find that for onshore loan to become a lot more competitive than offshore loan, both in terms of rate, in terms of term, tenor, and the flexibility as well. And also without our currency risk as well. So I would say that more and more I can see that local bank have developed ability to offer much longer tenor loans, much bigger ticket size, and they can really provide tailor-made solution for local companies. On the other hand, I would say that I still see some big companies are still going with the offshore loan. I think the main purpose is really to raise their reputation in the international capital market, because they have bigger goal is that they really want to go international in the future. So I still see that both onshore and offshore are working together. I think probably it will take some time before the offshore market to take off again, when you see the gap between offshore and onshore rate narrow in the future. But also, I think if you look at from the central bank perspective, right, they have expressed some concern of the offshore loan growing significantly faster. For medium and long-term offshore loan, you need to go through the restoration of the central bank, but for short-term, it's not registered. And that's where there's a big amount in terms of short-term offshore loan has increased in the past. Another area I would say that I still see that foreign banks still play a very important role in providing offshore funding. Given the single lending limit constraint, right, for foreign bank here, given their limited capital in the country, and also the credit growth cap posed on each bank country. So normally every year we got about 14-15% credit growth, right? And with a very small balance sheet, then in terms of absolute amount, it's very small for foreign bank to grow. So the common structure is that foreign bank then will work closely together with their offshore parent to provide financing to onshore company here, and the onshore bank then act as an agency to take over the collateral in the country. So I still see the kind of structure work really well in the future. And I think that if you look at the funding need for Vietnam market, the country still needs significant capital for infrastructure development, for green investment in the country. So I think we need both for onshore and offshore funding in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Han. Actually, I think we have questions that we want to ask everyone to vote. The reason we are talking about offshore only is because onshore loan volume is still quite hard to track. Yep. Looks like we're going to have a good year. Maybe the second one.
The number's certainly good for us. I'm going to keep voting.
Well, that's really nice. At least we can see majority thinks that there's going to be a good year for Vietnam offshore loan market this year. Now, that is a very good start. Maybe the second question as well, which is more, on the credit growth side. So how has the local bank managed credit growth, at the back of very challenging market conditions? Now, last year, the credit growth was set at 15%, and then this year, 16%. I mean, in your view, how has the local bank managing this?
So I think if I look at credit growth, it's very interesting. So if you look at from 2023 and prior to that, central bank tend to set very very close cap on credit growth. And basically, every time when you reach the credit growth, you fully utilize credit growth, you need to go and ask for approval. Last year, they adopted a more flexible approach. So if you have a certain good credit scoring or good scoring on your behavior, your performance, right, then you have a high credit growth, and it's automatic formula. You don't need to go and seek for the approval. The moment the central bank move with that kind of more like autopilot formula, many banks struggle to fill up the credit growth. Because when you don't have enough room, then you always feel hungry for that, right? But the moment you have a lot, then you struggle to fill up the quota. So that's the first point. The second point is that if I look at last year, if you look at the market itself, it's a difficult market. So for those banks who have grown the loan book aggressively in the past, tend to find a lot of trouble in the portfolio. Real estate market is another sector that is really a big pain point for many banks in the market, especially for local banks. So I would say that some of the credit growth last year are due to I would say that either restructure loan or renewal or overdue loan. That customer couldn't repay the loan, then bank have no other option but have to roll over both the principal and the interest rate. So the growth itself actually is not a healthy growth. There's a portion of growth we still see in the book across the sector, mostly in manufacturing, for trade, import, export, we still see good growth. Over there, we still see good growth in the mortgage market, but only for real purpose, not for speculative purpose. So for those individuals who buy property to live, I think it's still working really well. The retail segment, I still see that good growth so far. So in general, I would say that even though the growth for credit growth for the market, I think was at 15-16% last year, you need to discount, I think, at least 30-40%. Really just to cover for restructured loan. Only the remaining one are really for real growth in the economy. So again, that just reflects that very weak credit growth demand for last year. This year, I think we expect that things will improve, but again, it will be gradual recovery. It's not a very quick turnaround overnight for the economy.
You mentioned real estate. I think that is really that's a topic that many people here would like to understand. So, Mr. Hai, what are your thoughts on the improvement in the real estate market? And it's gone through a tough time in the last 18 months. Are we seeing the light in the tunnel yet?
I think it is a yes and no. So I visited a few areas in the country. So Phu is an area, Cam Ranh, Da Nang. There's many empty kind of ghost town. So you have seen thousands of units that just empty over there. Then there's no buyer, no people living there at the moment. So I think that's a pocket that still see a lot of problem in the future. I don't see it will get resolved anytime soon. And then buying also really struggle to clear those assets at the moment. But then for the asset in the main city where people really try to buy and live, in fact, for the last few years, you can see that due to the constraint of resolving legal issue for a lot of property real estate project in big city, actually there's not enough supply in big city. So for those developers who manage to get their project up and running in big city, especially for Hanoi Ho Chi Minh City, and then you're really targeting the segment that people want to buy and live in those properties, I think working really well so far. I think I can see that the industrial real estate are also performing really well. So industrial park are really booming. Even the China Plus One strategy, that diversification. I see a lot of Chinese companies are moving over, and a lot of other Asian companies also moving over as well. I think for office, I also see that there's a real demand for really high-end grade A office coming. But if you are like really at grade B and grade C, with the office in a remote area, probably it's not working well. Because many companies now are looking for a greener office. So they are looking for higher standard, willing to pay high price. But you need to be able to offer like the right product for those tenants. So again, I can see there's a mixed pocket. Overall, I think underlying growth still strong if you target the right segment.
Thank you, Mr. Hai. I think overall we can say that it's positive. Now, moving on, we talked a little bit about investment. Maiden, come to you. Welcome to Vietnam, and EDC opened the rep office in Vietnam last year, as you have mentioned. Would you share with us the insights on EDC decision to expand into Vietnam, and what are the favorable factors that draw the investment into the country in your view?
Yeah, thank you. I gotta admit that when I read this question, I kind of laughed internally in a kind of a shameful way because I think Canada's pretty late. So I'll have to admit that, right?
Never.
Right? So I mean, it's like, okay, why did you come? I was like, well, because everybody else is here, so we thought we'd come as well. But I think for EDC, I mean, I'm not the expert as far as, okay, the region, etc. And we've heard from experts, right? And I follow certain experts, and there's the geopolitical side, right? And there's everything that even, is affecting Canada with the US right now, etc. And the China plus one, obviously some big reasons why Vietnam now. And I'm actually old enough to remember not one but two Argentine crises where I actually was covering that part of the world, and I always thought, it's now for, it was Brazil, and it was Argentina, etc. So my point is I'm not necessarily naive, and it does sound a bit cliche, but I think the reality is that there is kind of a perfect storm, right? Like there is all of these things that are happening, and I think Vietnam and probably a couple of the other countries, to be fair, that are within my region are hot markets right now. For EDC, we're seeing a combination of two things, right? Number one, we're seeing Canadian companies that are coming here, and I would also with the message of we've had Manulife has been in Vietnam for 30 years, one of the most important insurance companies in the world, Sun Life as well, and Lululemon, right? That's important, right? Lululemon has also been here,
It is important.
Very important. But I think my point would be is that we're seeing this perfect storm, geopolitical, all the things that everybody knows, and then also from EDC side, we're seeing pockets of Canadian investment. And then for us, the first thing or the top thing that I'd like you to remember from this comment is we think that EDC can bring more investment and more trade, right? So we have probably the closest banking relationships with the Canadian pension funds, with Brookfield, which I did a bit of a AI exercise and realized it's about $3 trillion worth of investment between the pension funds and Brookfield. So, a huge opportunity. We want to bring them here, and we need to partner with other banks and other ECAs and we'll need the help of lawyers. So, did I get everybody? No, kind of, right? So I think there's a big opportunity to work together, and I think the reason why we're here is probably those factors, but I think my message is I think we've got a lot to offer, even though Canada's not the biggest, but I think we've got a lot of very specific things that EDC can offer together with partners to actually make a difference in Vietnam and the future of Vietnam.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone here looking forward to working with you. Now, private credit funds activities in Vietnam has grown over the years. And do you expect these private credit funds to increase investment in the country? Which are the focus sectors that we should be watching this year? I would say both positively and cautiously.
Sure. So maybe I think it's good to take a step back and try to explain why private credit has come to Vietnam in recent years. So I think the first thing is, with the fast growth in Vietnam for the past decades, quite a number of local companies have reached to a very good size, right? Groups like Vingroup, Masan, Sovico Group, and so on and so forth. So now with that size, right, it's actually attractive to private credit investors like us. One is that the bigger group generally is more resilience inside the group. Group tend to be able to take a more shock if, let's say, things go well or one or two projects go well. They have the capacity to absorb that shock financially. Second thing is that they probably have a lot more capital channel in the local bank, local bond, offshore bond, equity markets, hybrid capital. That combination of those actually will help them to address some of the situation a lot more better than compared to the SME. The third is that with the larger size, we've seen that some of the group basically have expanded the management team to be a more complete management team. Especially, it's very helpful when you talk to someone that understand international capital market, international lenders, practices, preference, and ideally, but not critically, is that if they're able to handle this discussion in English language. It's a lot easier for foreigners to be engaged with them. They're able to converse in English language. So with that, the last 5-6 years, we've seen that private credit has started to move into Vietnam as a market. I think that's partly helped by the fact that in Southeast Asia, Vietnam used to be a very big market for private credit. But a lot of the Indonesian during the past was driven by mining-related stuff and palm oil. And both in recent past has strong ESG issue. So with that decline of like market size and demands in Indonesia, Vietnam kind of quite nice at fill up that gap, right? Now going to 2025, I think quite a lot of private credit will still focusing on the larger company for now. We have interacted with quite a bit of the smaller size, mid-sized company in Vietnam, but some of them we find that financial-wise, business performance-wise, they are quite good, but we just feel that maybe in terms of the understanding of a international lenders and what our expectation is in terms of like corporate governance, in terms of reporting, we are not quite sure they are there. So we kind of engaging them, but we don't think we will put capital to work with them. So we're probably sticking to the larger group at this point in time. Now, I think for 2025, I think private credit is likely to increase investment, generally speaking, in Vietnam. There's a couple of reasons. I think as what Mr. Hai has mentioned that 2024 is actually it's quite a challenging year, especially the first half. There's been quite a lot of business uncertainties. There are some disturbance in the market, fundraising, and so on and so forth. And we've seen that quite a lot of businessmen in the first quarter was quite distracted. Everyone just trying to get the capital, buy back the public bond, try to sort all this thing out. Then the housing, the ratio went to be a crisis, and that has quite a big impact, right? But 2025, looking back at the last quarter in Vietnam, we find in the real estate side there are certain slots that's become quite good, like Hanoi, performance has been very great. Ho Chi Minh, I think the price holding up quite well, but I think partly because there's a lack of supply. There's a lack of supply in this market. So I think economy-wise, fundamentally, it's getting better, right? FDI should continue to flow, but I think FDI is a little bit uncertain for now because you got a new president in US that look at trade surplus with a different perspective. And Vietnam basically has become the country with the third largest trade surplus with the US. So if FDI to continue to flow into Vietnam, right, they will generate a lot more investment opportunity and so on and so forth. In terms of industry and demands, I guess the way we look into it, there'll be two broad. We kind of look into two broad categories. One is the industry or companies that basically are growing well. They need additional capital that the bank somehow not able to satisfy them. one way or another where we can come in to provide an incremental capital to support their growth. So we do expect industrial park, logistics, let's start with the FDI investment team that will continue to do well. Renewable energy, it's an interesting area, but it's also an area that investors need to be quite careful because there's no PDA concept in Vietnam, right? And the curtailment connectivity issue brown is still an issue. We see that the uncertainty element can be quite high, and that will affect how you kind of border your cash flow, try to figure out how much debt you can lend to them, so on and so forth. Real estate, I think, is an interesting market as well. Despite the challenges, there's actually demand because we look into real estate that are able to, put to market for sale. The profit margin is actually quite high, right? So for a company that make 30-40% gross margin, if you need additional capital to put to work, they're willing to pay up to get that capital and implement something. So there's something that we are quite focused on, try to look for opportunities. Consumer consumption trend is something that is quite interesting for us because as the economic growth, the per capita income in Vietnam has gone up quite a fair bit. So we do expect that there will be certain consumer consumption trends theme that will be quite interesting for us. In terms of industry that we're careful of, I don't think there's a very specific sector that we are careful of because we tend to be more focused on transaction by transaction and we look at things bottom up rather than like a public equity investor. You look at theme, then kind of cascade it out. Voice is always bottom up. I think the biggest things that we want to make sure for now is that anything that we want to invest and things that need government approval, we want it to be approved and signed off as much as possible. Things that we know what box to tick, make sure all those are ticked, rather than you go to investment that, expecting, the government will approve this in like 3 months' time. But that elements of government approval is still highly uncertain. Yeah.
Now, but how about, as a private credit investor, what are the challenges that you face? You mentioned a little bit just now, and what do you think are the key areas that Vietnam as a country should improve to create a more conducive investment environment?
Sure. So for private credit, typically in terms of structuring wise for deal, it's fairly similar to bank loan, generally speaking. So generally it takes the form of debt, and because most foreign investors are offshore, right? So we do face similar problem like any international, and the key structural elements that we face is offshore loans can't take hard asset in Vietnam as security, right? There are few structures that have evolved in the market for the good 5-10 years that people have adopted, including us, right? To basically put in a deal structure that replicate the effect of a mortgage on a hard asset in Vietnam. The challenge is that, as of today, this structure has not tested out in a court in Vietnam, right? So people have kind of assumed that, if you go to a rule, you go to regulations, you analyze it, it should work on paper. It's just not tested. But having said that, we do have a transaction that faces a bit of difficulty. The company has bit of issues that we are managing and helping them to solve the problem. So far the structure that we use, it protects us. It worked well. So I think one of the key elements that you need to find a local bank that works well with you and basically do what we have agreed from day one. Now, in terms of things that Vietnam as a country can help really to change the environment for private credit, I think for bank as well, is that the biggest uncertainty we have is that anything that we need a competent authority in Vietnam to approve, the timing of the approval is very uncertain, right? It can be, on paper it can be 3 months, it can be 6 months, it can be 9 months. So you can't really, kind of pin it down, right? Which means that a lot of people will basically have to move it to the other action. That look, I can disperse the cash once all the approval is done. I can't disperse the cash with the condition subsequent that, or within 3 months this approval will be done. Because if the approval not done, the company cannot carry out the project, and then the business plan cannot be executed, the cash flow cannot be generated, then things will get stuck, right? So I think that's one of the key message feedback that we had for for Vietnam government.
Thank you very much. Now, something to bring to the next questions as well, right? So I'm sure while there are challenges, there probably also have been things that have gone well. So maybe this question is for all three of you. How the Vietnam government or as shaped an environment that has been encouraging to foreign investors? I mean, from various factors, right? So I would say macroeconomic, political, and private and public capital markets perspective. And are there any example of regulations or policy that you're seeing that has been helpful in providing a very conducive investment environment?
I'm going to go first because I only know one. I think the private the DPPAs were kind of a bit of a game changer in that we had more interest from Canadian investors, the ones that I mentioned before. So I mean, I think there's still some stuff to work out with that, etc. But that was definitely, when that came through, we started getting some of the regular investors that we see in other parts of the world, reaching out to EDC and say, okay, well, what does this mean? Can you help us to understand it, etc. So that would be the ones that we saw as a very positive development.
I think for my side, I would say that Vietnamese government has always been very favorable for investors. To the point that sometimes I would say that sometimes put the domestic investor at disadvantaged position as well. But again, put that aside, I would say that a lot of people also ask me whether Vietnam is similar to China, because it looks like it's a communist country, right? Capitalism mindset. But the answer is no, right? It's very different. And then the difference is really that I think the Vietnamese government, they recognize that for Vietnam to succeed, they really need capital for investors. So for them, it's a really survival game. Is that all the preferential treatment, or the listening to feedback from foreigners, I think is very critical for Vietnamese government to improve. So what I would say that probably the biggest thing I have seen so far is that their openness to listen to feedback. So yes, you might not be always happy with the policy regulation in Vietnam, but they're happy to listen. They might not be able to implement what you recommend immediately, but they remember. And they will choose the right time to implement those policies. Because if you put yourself in their shoes, you will recognize that sometimes it's not easy to implement those changes due to several reasons. So again, I think based on my experience in Vietnam so far, I think they do listen, and they often pick the best practice from other countries, and they're very, very happy to listen to those best practices.
So for me, I think my view is that a lot of investors that came to Vietnam is essentially it's more driven by structural macro factors. So one of the things that investors like to like coming to do FDIs in Vietnam, one is that Vietnam have a good size population, about close to 100 million. Right. Second is that the working population is actually at the golden age right now. So if you start a manufacturing plant for the next 5-10 years, you don't need to worry about availability of worker, right? Because the pool is there. High literacy, people here are hardworking, right? And then plus the fact that there was a push for China Plus One a couple of years ago. A lot of companies come to build, and then followed by their supply chain. So slowly you see that there's a bit of network effect and make the whole supply chain logistic a little bit better. And we have seen that Vietnam government actually has invested quite a fair bit in infrastructure, especially up north, right? You know, the road linking between Hanoi and Haiphong, you know, it's a good, very nice, good highway. You know, it make the transport more efficient. So I think that actually will really is where attracts the foreign investor. I think what the Vietnamese government potential from a direction perspective is a make your rule clearer and make sure that the approval timings is basically within a predictable time fashion. So people know that, look, I want to start a plant here. Do I get the land in 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year? Or it takes 18 months? Then people can kind of plan backward, like, you know, if I need to shift, you know, I probably need to retrench my workforce in part of China to plan. So it actually helps a lot if there is clarity, timing, and in processes.
Thank you. Now, I think the next questions is we can't leave this room without talking about these questions, right? So, 20th January, there'll be a new US government. So, now Vietnam has been benefiting a lot from FDI, you know, MNCs taking advantage, China plus one. You know, we see investment from Samsung, LG, and NVIDIA, especially recently in the high-tech sector. So, I think we want to hear from three of you. I mean, what do you think, or how do you see the Trump administration's impact on the Vietnam future?
Let's hear from Nathan first.
Yeah.
I
So
do not
before
wanna
this,
go
Nathan
first
said he
on
will
this
go
one.
first. He
I do
really,
not.
really has a lot to say about this.
Yeah. We're not going to be the 51st state, that's for sure. It's for damn sure. You know what? I mean, I think it goes back to kind of the storm continues, the storm gets worse. Is it as bad as you think it's going to be? It could be. I think that there's opportunity in all of that, right? I mean, I think there's opportunity for Canada, there's opportunity for Vietnam. It's one of the reasons also why EDC is here, because we've got to get Canadian companies to diversify, because we depend too much on the U.S. But you know, I mean, it's hard to say. I think it's the only thing is that it's going to be bumpy, right? It's not going to be easy, because you know, you can say, you know, tomorrow it'll be 25%. It's not, but it's going to be something, right? He's coming with something. I mean, I think he's, you know, I'm not a political expert, but I mean, he's going to do something that's going to shake everything up, right? But I think there's opportunity in everything, even some of the things that will be shaken up. And you know, I think both Vietnam and Canada and other countries, you know, you'll find opportunities in those. And I mean, a lot of things that Trump says are not good for the U.S., so they could also change really quick, right? I mean, that's just his style. Also, he could make a change and then change it back, right? So anyway, it's going to be bumpy. That's my answer. I'm going with it's going to be bumpy.
So I think, as my panelists also mentioned, that Vietnam has become the third biggest trade surplus country with US, right? So we run a huge risk that Trump will get overexcited with imposing tariff on Vietnam. However, my view is that Vietnam has always been, I would say, that pretty smart in a way that try not to be close to any country. And I also don't think that US want to push Vietnam into too close to China. So I think there will be a deal between the two countries. Either by Vietnam need to buy more goods from US, which I think also good for Vietnam as well. I think definitely the two countries will find a way to work together. This one. But I see the implication is that there will be a lot more Chinese company will find a way to enter Vietnam market. Either they set up here as a hub, but also sometimes they will make Vietnam as a transit country, so that they can avoid the tariff from US. Right? That put Vietnam at risk, because the moment that a lot of China's goods are labeled under Vietnam brand, Vietnam can run the huge risk that getting a attraction in terms of the imposed with the tariff. So that I see that's the risk. The second risk I can see is that in terms of infrastructure, right? I think some of you, if you live in Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, you might enjoy the traffic jam for the last few weeks already, right? So my concern that if we have bump up in terms of investment in the country, whether infrastructure, both in terms of human resource, in terms of hard infrastructure, are we ready for that kind of inflow of foreign investment? So that's the second concern. Thirdly, I would say that it's really about like what kind of investment Vietnam want to attract. Because I think, like, yes, we have cheap labor costs, but it's no longer cheap compared with many other countries. So again, what is the strategy for the country and how can we go up the value chain to make sure we attract the right investment? I think it's very, very important. I think opportunity is there, but we need to be selective in terms of what kind of opportunity we want to pick up going forward.
I don't really have a view like what Trump will do. I think no one knows except himself, right? But the way I look into this is that is the stuff they exported from Vietnam is that kind of job. Is that something that US really want to bring back onshore to the US to produce itself? It's unlikely. So if you increase tariff on Vietnam, quite likely is that this supply chain, part of the production will start to shift to other country, right? That is not being targeted by President Trump at that point in time. It may shift to Indonesia, it may shift to India. So it doesn't really solve much for US except trying to push the supply chain to other non-affected country at that point in time, right? But I guess Vietnam, as any country, like what Nathan has suggested, is that it's best to diversify, right, as much as possible to more countries, so you're not beholden to a single country. I think that's the biggest lesson that everyone have learned from Trump, not to overly dependent on anyone.
Thank you. We will have Q&A now, so feel free to send in your questions to Slido. We do have some questions on the screen here. I think the first one is quite obvious from Mr. Hai. To further develop the onshore syndicated loan market, the lack of a benchmark-based rate that represent a general banking market cost of fund is a hurdle. Any suggestion on how can we address this? The benchmark rate for onshore, yeah. So there isn't a general banking rate. So let's say right now we either use Vinibor or we use the average deposit rate, right? I think the question here is that there hasn't been that there isn't a benchmark base. So do you have any suggestion how we can solve this?
So right now we also, I think I said most of local bank now based on the deposit rate of the for state-owned bank as a benchmark. I think that probably it doesn't reflect the interbank market like LIBOR, SIBOR we often use in other markets. But to a certain extent, I would say that it reflects fairly the funding cost for bank. Given there's a lot of focus of central bank to make sure that bank using customer deposit to fund for the loan book instead of using interbank funding for customer loan book. So my view is that going forward, that's still the market benchmark going forward. I think for Vinibor, there has been a lot of changes in the past after the LIBOR scandal. At least from when I work for a local bank right now, I don't see that as become a benchmark when we price our customer loan. And I don't think that will be changed anytime soon.
Thank you. Actually, one more question that we wanted Mr. Hai to help us. So, what are the key risks offshore lenders should pay attention in this evolving loan market for Vietnam?
With key risks.
Yeah.
So I say that obviously collateral is definitely concerned from collateral asset is concerned. But also another point is that even from a local lender perspective, if you lend to customer and you take collateral you take asset as a collateral, right? It doesn't mean even you do everything right by law, it doesn't mean that you can enforce the collateral. Because when there's an investigation case, and you can talk about the Batik Fat case as a good example, right? Many banks have naively take collateral of Batik Fat case. They thought that it's good collateral. They thought they can sell out the asset, which is not the case. Because when the police say, look, the source of fund might come from illegal source when the customer bought the asset in the past. you cannot sell the asset. So again, we need to be very careful, and my advice is that always conduct very careful KYC of your customer, making sure you know who's your customer before you lend to them. Yes, they might have a source of repayment, but whether they are able to repay you if they face some investigation. So again, that's something we need to watch out. Thirdly, I think it's a very lengthy process for both for onshore buying and also for offshore buying to enforce or to sell the asset. So let's say for us or for OCB, if I look at real estate collateral asset, easily it takes us a year to sell out the asset because you have to go through the court process, and there's a several trial that customer might refuse to cooperate with the bank, and then when they agree, then when you try to take over the asset, they're still living in the asset. So again, it's very lengthy process. In fact, we are advising or we are lobbying the government that they should adopt a more, I would say, more supportive policy for banks to be able to enforce the asset collateral. In the past, we used to have we call the decree, I think 42, when bank we don't need to take consent from customer, just take over the asset and we sell the asset. So I think that they are working on that kind of mechanism at the moment. So hopefully that will give bank more ammunition to be able to resolve the asset issue in the future.
Thank you very much. Now we have come to the end. Thank you very much, Mr. Hai and Nathan, for your very valuable insights. I hope everyone enjoys as much as I do. And please feel free to stay back and maybe there'll be a networking with our very distinguished speakers today. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, speakers. Please do stay on the stage for a group photo. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. So now it comes to the last sessions of today's conference. It's a great pleasure for me to invite our next speakers. They will focus on the USD funding and the opportunities for the Vietnamese corporates and sponsors in Asia. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome our moderator, Mr. Billy C., partner, Northern Rose Fulbright, and panelists, Ms. Toi Tran, Vietnam Legal Head, Cathay United Bank, Ms. May Cheng Lim, Director, Loan Syndications, Maybank, Mr. Vijay Agarwal, Executive Director, Financial Solutions, ASEAN Standard Chartered Bank, Mr. Abhishek Changofa, Head of Distribution South and Southeast Asia Loan Capital Markets, Asia SMBC.
Where is Abhishek? Oh, there you are. Come on. Hi, everyone. I'll wait for Abhishek to take his seat. Welcome to the final session of the day. This is 45 minutes on offshore financings for Vietnamese borrowers, and then our closing remarks, and then our drinks reception. So firstly, thank you to the Aplma, as always, for putting on such well-run events and creating the Asian loan market community we have today. What are we going to cover in this session on offshore facilities? First, we're going to start with the geopolitical trends that we've seen over the last couple of years, state of play in 2024, and then we're going to look 2025 and beyond. As part of this, we're going to talk about also what we're seeing across the different sectors of the Vietnamese economy. We'll then turn to different types of offshore financing structures we typically see in Vietnam, and how recent changes in the economy and government policy might have an impact on the popularity of some of these structures. Then, if we have time, we'll talk about the culture of deal-making in Vietnam and how it might differ in other Asian jurisdictions. As usual, we will have Slido polls for you to participate in using your phone's QR code scanner. We'd encourage you to vote in these polls, the first one of which we will put up on the screen now while I introduce the panelists. So first, on my left and your right of me is Mei Ching Lim, the Director of Loan Syndications at Maybank in Singapore. She's responsible for origination, execution, and distribution of syndicated financings with a particular focus on Vietnam structured financing. Next to Mei Ching is Vijay Agarwal. Vijay is an Executive Director for the Financing Solutions team at Standard Chartered Bank in Singapore. Specializes in Southeast Asia with a particular focus of Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand. Next to Vijay is Thuy Tran. Thuy is the head of legal for Cathay United Bank in Vietnam and has significant in-house and private practice experience and is in fact a former colleague of mine. Finally, last but not least, we have Abhishek Changothia, who heads SMBC's distribution function within the Loan Capital Markets team. He covers South and Southeast Asia. I am Billy Sear. I'm a partner at Norton Rose Fulbright and your moderator for this session. So the first topic is geopolitical trends impacting offshore financing. And to set the stage for this discussion, we first need to cover what makes offshore facilities attractive to Vietnamese borrowers. Vijay, can I trouble you to step into the shoes of a Vietnamese borrower and just talk a little bit why a Vietnamese borrower might seek offshore funding from, say, a bank in Singapore?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So this is a question, which I cannot answer myself several times before I step into a client's office. Somebody who has not yet tapped the offshore loan market as to why they should be looking at, apart from obviously, offshore funding being a diversified source of funding for them. So as we all know that the central bank in Vietnam, which is SBV, they have sectoral caps on various sectors, which comes out every year. So banks onshore cannot lend beyond that sectoral cap, which is why there may be times when these borrowers may need to resort to offshore funding. Secondly, which is personally I've seen a lot of borrowers, they want capital for growth, but the structures which are available onshore are not that conducive. So if a borrower is seeking bullet or balloon repayment structure, wherein let's say they want to conserve cash for the next few years and they want to deploy that cash into their business, and hence they want a bullet loan structure. Such structures are not favored by local banks because V&D loan cannot be refinanced beyond its original maturity. So these are some reasons as to why onshore lenders resort to offshore borrowings. Last but not the least, local banks or onshore banks are still stuck with the mindset of lending to the opcos where the cash flows are, which means if a big group or a borrower needs a loan at the holding company level, the local banks do struggle to provide that capital, whereas offshore lenders are able to structure a solution which works both for the lenders and the borrower alike. So these are primarily some of the reasons I think, why onshore lenders go outside Vietnam and tend to borrow from offshore lenders.
Sounds convincing to me. Thanks, Vijay. Mei Ching, anything to supplement on this?
Yeah, sure. I think following what Vijay said, I think the key word is flexibility. So I think offshore lenders provide flexibility onshore borrowers, following what Vijay commented in terms of how onshore banks tend to like to lend to opcos. And so if you want a holdco type of financing, it's not always easy to structure. Predominantly because onshore banks, they don't usually want to take shares as security. Traditionally, they want a security package that has tangible assets, land, building, factory, that kind of thing. So that kind of flexibility allows the offshore lenders to provide a solution that's structure related. Then we take a look at flexibility that's provided from a use of funds purpose. So yes, offshore banks will need to get SBV approvals for any offshore loans for tenors more than 1 year. But I think the process is not as onerous as some borrowers that maybe haven't tried the offshore market. Maybe they think, oh no, it's very difficult. Actually, it's not. It's not as onerous from a proof of funding perspective, from a monitoring perspective. there's annual monitoring that's required, but definitely doable, right? I think the final point that I would mention is maybe in terms of refinancing. So offshore loans can be used to refinance the company's usage of their own internal funds. If they use it for capex, if they use it for expansion, you can use an offshore loan, refinance what you've already spent. Onshore loans, from a purpose perspective, is a little bit more restrictive. It can only refinance if you spent it in the last 12 months. So that doesn't give, onshore borrowers, Vietnamese borrowers, a lot of flexibility. And I think I'll add one more in terms of bank loan refinancing. So I think sometime last year, there was a slight relaxation in the policy where from an all-in pricing perspective, so if you raised an offshore loan, finance an existing loan, in the past you used to be restrained by your all-in pricing, it needed to be cheaper. You used to be restrained by your tenors. So those restrictions are no longer in place, and therefore, from an onshore borrower perspective, you do have a lot more flexibility to tap the offshore market for these kind of structures and funding.
Thanks, mate. I mean, Thuy, you have an interesting vantage point because you've been an in-house counsel at several international banks based out of Vietnam. What's your take on all this?
Yeah, actually, from a legal perspective, I will be talking about Meijing's second point, but the first point, I think, commercially, of course, our business guy also have been trying to be more flexible. Okay, either bullet balloon structure, have been trying to accommodate our clients' requests. Of course, I think it generally is quite the same to many other banks, not just regional bank like us, but almost the bank, right? And back to Meijing, yes. I think one of the points that my onshore fund is quite restricted is actually the 12-month period threshold for loan refinancing reimbursement, And that's another thing that make offshore funding become more relaxed and flexible is the removal of the borrowing costs against the refinancing purpose. Actually, this is a good movement back in 2023 already.
Abhishek, go ahead, please.
So I think one of the also very important point is diversification for the onshore borrowers as well. Right? Now, overall Asia Pacific loan market is somewhere around 500 billion equivalent, whereas the share of Vietnam was just about 3.5, 4 billion in that ballpark. So there is a lot of potential for the borrowers from Vietnam to access this huge pool of liquidity that is available. Obviously, it comes with certain conditions that would be there, but I think availability of liquidity in the syndication space, as well as diversification, which is like a new pool of liquidity for the borrowers onshore, that is a very interesting asset which the borrowers consider.
This sounds like a sales pitch. I promise you these are genuine advantages of offshore financing. But we'll now turn to the state of play in 2024. And when I think of the key theme of 2024, I think of relatively higher USD interest rates compared to, say, 2022, and how that's impacted the economic activity generally, therefore as a subset of that, lending activity. I mean, Abhishek, maybe I'll stay on you and maybe comment on the impact of that. The higher for longer interest rate environment.
Yeah. So I think if we see that, right, I mean, just a comparison between how the Vietnamese offshore markets have behaved over the last 1.5 to 2 years, where the liquidity has been tremendous, whereas credit growth has been slightly muted compared to the previous years, as well as on the US dollar side, interest rate rising, the benchmark rates are almost like 5.5% for that, right? And even now, that theme, despite the rate cuts coming down, that theme still seems to be higher. What we see is that once the government kicks off in the US, a lot of things are going to change. How the US dollar behaves and how the domestic actions would be, that gap should, the difference between onshore lending rates as well as what is available on the offshore side, syndicated market side, that gap should be acceptable level. And while the higher for longer theme continues to play, we don't see that gap to be on the other side of US dollar very favorable very soon. But it should narrow down, and I think that should make offshore a little bit more attractive for borrowers.
Thanks, Abhishek. Mei Cheng, from the Maybank perspective, have you got anything to add on that particular point? Or delta, the delta between the BNP?
Yeah, I think for sure, right? So 2024, we didn't see as big a growth in offshore syndicated loans. And that's, anybody can tell you, yeah, dollar rates, yes, it came down in the fourth quarter, not enough. And you can see what the local State Bank of Vietnam policies in terms of interest rates. They have regularly been keeping onshore lending rates low. And to boost certain sectors, you can see that the government has also imposed sort of short-term interest rate caps. So how high you can charge for certain sectors if you take the loan onshore. So it's like 5.5%. I think in some sectors it's 5%. Some sectors where the government is pushing for growth, this is agriculture, export-based, SMEs. Some of those sectors are benefiting from lower interest rates. Now, whether the delta will be between offshore funding and onshore funding, whether it will grow, whether it will narrow, hard to say, because every time you turn on the TV, there's people talking about different things. Will US reduce rates? If they do, when? If they do, how much? Possible they won't reduce at all, who knows? So it remains to be seen, I'm not so sure. But I think one thing to maybe highlight from we talked about rates, I think in terms of cap on certain sectors, bringing it back to Abhishek's point of offshore, there's a lot of liquidity. I think just to mention that offshore liquidity to Vietnamese borrowers, the largest pool for syndication has always been Taiwanese banks. So I think towards the end of last year, we did see a sort of limit restriction for the Taiwanese banks because there is a lot of pressure for them to keep capital for onshore real estate projects. And the cap that is imposed on these Taiwanese banks, it's a global cap. So it's basically invest in real estate in Vietnam or Taiwan or anywhere else in the world. And for as long as this cap remains tight, the liquidity, at least for Taiwanese lenders, may not be as much in the real estate sector. So I think that this kind of policies need to be looked at as well. Nothing specific for Maybank.
Thanks, Major. Another theme that saw emerging in 2024 is liquidity, but then fewer mandates, and there's a higher competition for mandates, which everybody on the stage understands, everybody in this room understands. PJ, what was your experience through that in 2024?
Something which all the bankers in the room have witnessed over the last 24 months. And if you kind of look at Vietnam, is definitely good to kind of consider the whole ASEAN context as to where the other markets are, because when lenders look at a specific country or when they look at ASEAN, they allocate the capital across countries. So historically, we have seen Indonesia and Vietnam being the two countries which had high demand of offshore capital. And if you kind of look at countries like Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, most of the borrowings have been onshore local. And even in some of these countries, like, for example, Thailand, the local bond market is very deep and it's well developed, wherein, in a single tap, a borrower can issue $500 to $1 billion of Thai baht bonds. Now, coming to Vietnam, the local capital market is still not developed. I haven't seen cases wherein borrowers have borrowed more than $100 million in one tap. So that market is not yet developed for various reasons. And when you have limited deals, which lenders look at, of course, there is heightened competition. And that competition, unfortunately, comes at the expense of loose structures. Flexible, I won't call it flexible, but at times those structures don't even make sense for a prudent lender. But when you look at so much of dry powder out there, of course, if you don't deploy, somebody else is going to deploy in order to make that yield. So I would say that it's an interesting market for a sophisticated borrower to be in, who can demand the right terms and conditions from lenders, knowing that there's so much waiting to be deployed. To put things in perspective, recently, I think there's a large conglomerate out here who has successfully renegotiated pricing on a large syndicated loan by almost 80 to 100 basis point. And this loan was done only 2 years back. It's a few $100 million facility. So to come to your point, Billy, as in, if the borrower is sophisticated and know where its price curve should be, they're in a good spot.
Absolutely, no hints there. We now move on to cover the key sectors in Vietnam, and we're going to put up a poll for you to vote on. You'll see we've identified 4 sectors in particular: manufacturing, real estate, financial institutions, and infrastructure and energy, including renewables. The first sector we're going to cover while you're voting is the real estate sector. And I remember a spate of real estate-backed deals, a lot of them from 2017 to 2022, but then a subsequent dropping off of real estate deals after that, except for maybe real estate logistics. I think there are a couple of factors that have influenced this change. BJ, I'll stay on you. What are you seeing in the real estate space?
I started covering Vietnam back in 2017, and until 2021, early 22, every third deal which was coming to me was a real estate transaction, whether it was from a corporate, a Singaporean, one of the GLs is looking into Vietnam, or a local corporate here, or maybe a private equity fund. But things changed since 2022 after the series of government crackdown, and there were a few instances. So I would say real estate as a sector is deprived of capital. There is a lot of capital which is required there, but the deals needs to be structured well, and the tenors go long, and given the offshore capital can be bullet in nature and can be long tenured. This is one sector which I believe in the previous discussion, one of the panelists did mention that is witnessing a lot of inquiries or deals from this particular sector. So this sector, if you ask me personally, I'm long on. Despite the short to mid-term challenges this sector will throw at you, this is one sector which bankers or lenders should not ignore. If the deal is properly structured, it's a win-win both for the borrower and the lender.
Thanks, Vijay. Abhishek, what do you?
Agree with what Vijay said, but I think this sector is very promising. After a lull of a year and a half or so, we've started to see green shoots in terms of many new developments coming around, at least in the northern part and here as well, right? Now, one thing, while the sector remains very promising, is that from an offshore borrowing perspective, right, there's always a very limited amount of liquidity which is available, because generally that's a sector where a lot of banks, they like to support their home markets, and a lot of regulation also gets in terms of lending limits to a particular sector, and then when it is global market, it does take some impact there. So also then the next point is how do you balance the domestic market versus offshore market, developed market versus an emerging market where banks are still getting comfortable around mortgages, security structures, and those, right? So for a well-structured transaction, for transaction where you have very strong domestic sponsors as well as some JV partners involving sponsors from North Asia, Taiwan, Korea, Japan, etc. I think those deals can become very attractive within this sector.
Tui, as the only person on this panel who actually lives in Vietnam, what are you seeing for real estate?
Yeah, actually, it's not my supplement at all. It's actually my recap of what Ms. Dong from SB, Xenosia, what she shared in the previous section, and also what Anhai from OCB shared in the previous section. So actually, as you can see in the, yeah, Ms. Dong said that, okay, last year, I mean in 2024, SBB have been issuing quite a lot of directive instruction to the credit institution in Vietnam to implement a certain measure to stabilize deposit interest rate. That's kind of one way to facilitate the reduction of lending interest rate. I think this is one of the measures that the SPV want to support the economy in terms of lending interest rate. Back to the funding, also Mr. said that the last year the overall credit growth, I think reached around 15% on 108, right? Why the credit growth for real estate, particularly, already reached around 14%. So you will see that it's kind of this sector already surpassed the overall credit growth. So I can see that there's still more room for funding. From my perspective, more room for onshore funding, but due to certain restrictions that you just shared, then of course, borrowers here are looking for more opportunities from offshore facilities. But one thing I think more from my side, that the enforcement issue. So if it comes to me as a legal person at bank, enforcement scenario and distress would be one of the factors that impacting our offshore lender funding strategy for real estate sector.
We'll now move on to the manufacturing sector, and one thing you hear routinely is with the slowdown in China, there is people looking for alternative bases in which to set up manufacturing centers, and the country here most often in Asia is Vietnam. Mei Ching, what do you say?
Yeah, I think the panel before has emphasized as well, right, that the fair bit of investments from large conglomerates, we're talking MNC, Samsung, LG, they have already invested and continue to invest, I think, in manufacturing hubs, growing their manufacturing hubs here in Vietnam. I think that we would want to see, or at least I hope to see, more supply chain, local manufacturers supporting these businesses, export-based type manufacturing companies, tap the offshore market a bit more. I think right now they are quite well supported onshore, get working capital lines, local currency, there's ample supply for them. But I think from a flexibility perspective, they will definitely get that. And I think this sector is something that all banks, regardless of where your lender is, all banks understand the sector, all banks like this sector. So I would hope to see that for onshore borrowers, at least in the manufacturing sector, to look towards offshore loans, flexibility, and maybe diversification as well of their liquidity pool. And in terms of the fact that there's a lot of capital to be deployed, and this is a sector, to be fair, that all banks would be keen to look at, especially for Vietnam.
Thanks, Mei Ching. Abhishek, Vijay, any supplement to that?
We're talking manufacturing sector, I think further drilling down, there are sectors which of course, you may want to avoid. For example, currently the automotive sector is going through a bit of slowdown, so companies who are in that supply chain may not find it very easy to raise offshore capital because it's an industry-wide issue. But if you're talking about the sector in general and the funds are required not for speculative growth, this sector should be in a good position to raise capital. Offshore lenders, we haven't seen a lot of pure play manufacturing companies going out and raising large amounts of capital. But then I think the onus is on bankers like us to prepare the bride ready for the marriage, which means go and explain what benefits it brings that particular borrower rather than the lender just extending a loan.
Nice analogy, Vijay. Abhishek.
I think all the right things, right? a lot of investment is flowing into this sector from global players, large foreign sponsors, etc. as well, right? But I think from a loan market or a lending perspective, right, the opportunities would take some time for it to achieve a decent scale that can become financeable, because of a lot of these FDI which comes in, the financing is usually tied up with their home market banks or their global banking relations, etc. Right? So for truly homegrown manufacturers be able to reach that scale where they can tap offshore, I think that's going to take some time. While it started, I hope in the next few years, this just going back to the poll that I see, right? I mean, 13%. I hope that number grows a lot more, and the bankers here also feel very bullish about the manufacturing sector, because that's a very important part for the economy.
Greetings, Eileen. If we can just show the poll results, just to remind you what they were. The highest vote is for financial institutions, and that is a sector talking banks, whether they be government-owned or privately owned, securities companies. That's a sector that's stayed active all the way to the end of 2024. Abhishek, maybe I'll stay on you. What do you say?
I tend to 100% agree with what the bankers in the room also feel about. And I think it's coming from a perspective that recently the government here has announced that they're looking at the GDP growth of 8% for FY25. And SBV announced that they're looking at 18 to 19% of growth in the credit. Now, definitely that is going to lead to expansion of bank lending activity and then consequently on the borrowing side as well, right? So that optimism that the onshore growth will drive liquidity, I think from a loan perspective as well, we'll see a lot of borrowing coming from the FI sector. Over the last 2 years, while a large part of the market has been a bit quieter, we've seen a bit here and there some security companies or banks that have accessed the offshore loan markets. I believe that in this year that will intensify. Also in 2022, there has been a few large bank borrowings that were done, and that a lot of it has been repaid. So there's a lot of demand for those people on the investor side, on the lender side, as well as now with the optimism shown by the government. I think the banks in the country will look to access some bit of that liquidity. Also, a lot of this growth, the financing for local corporates, that needs to be fueled by the banks. I'm very optimistic about that sector right now.
Thanks, Abhishek. We have one question on the screen, so we might pause to read that out. Based on the poll, looks like real estate and manufacturing are out of favour. Does that mean that offshore financing deal structures may now not look to hard assets as much as before from a credit risk perspective? Any takers for that particular question?
If you look at real estate, and offshore lenders, they're a bit wary about lending to a real estate sector in Vietnam because of what has happened in the last 12 to 18 months. And the reason is, I would say, to some extent valid. But again, real estate as a whole cannot be rejected because offshore lenders cannot lend to residential estate because that's not allowed. And then what leaves us with is the commercial and the industrial. The industrial and the logistic real estate space is doing extremely well because of the supply chain shift and the China plus one strategy playing out well. We haven't seen a lot of, demand coming out in the loan syndicated market because a lot of these borrowings are being done on a bilateral basis. We don't see what exactly is happening. But we do understand that large borrowers in the space are resorting to offshore lenders. And with regards to manufacturing, there's not much capex which has happened. The capex cycle has slowed down a bit because typically in any country when rates goes up, you would not go and introduce capacity unless you are fully tapped out. So these are sectors wherein maybe immediately this year you will not see a lot of demand, but in the next few years certainly this sector will attract capital.
On the manufacturing side, just to add to what Vijay said, right, I think more than a credit risk perspective from a structuring standpoint, I think lack of opportunities is also a concern. And that takes time, as I explained it. So while the manufacturing overall as a sector would grow, there's a lag effect in terms of financeability of those projects. I mean, it needs to attain a certain scale and size for it to become attractive for offshore lenders. When that starts to happen, obviously manufacturing will be a very attractive place because what lenders globally like is hard assets. They like stable manufacturing kind of setup where you have, where you can see plants which are running cash flows and all of this. So I think it's just the opportunities are very few right now. And that's the reason why in the coming year, we don't see that sector to be a dominant one.
As the only sector we haven't covered so far is infrastructure and energy and renewables. What are your views on that particular sector?
So I think that is a very attractive sector because obviously the demography, the growth which the government is expecting and all of those things would definitely lead to a very high demand in terms of energy consumption as well as consequent infrastructure development as well. Right now, from a financing standpoint, there's a lot of interest coming from project finance banks, both onshore as well as some bit of offshore structures as well. So I do also agree that the sector will have a lot more opportunities in the coming year. One of the areas that has always been of some bit of overhang there is the PPAs and the contracts. I think still some work to be done in terms of making it more palatable to a wider pool of offshore lenders for it to be available for different pockets.
Absolutely. There's a regulatory overlay to look at as well. I mean, TWE on the legal/regulation side, how it sort of sits at the moment in Vietnam. What do we need to do?
Yeah, I think it still depends on the particular sector. It depends on, of course, real estate. Would be the enforcement issue one of the most hesitant factor that we are considering. For manufacturing, yes, of course, we all know that Vietnam is more benefiting the China Plus One strategy. Of course, we are at the Taiwanese bank here. We have so many FDI clients here coming from Taiwan with their parent company in Taiwan. So in manufacturing sector, when we do give either onshore funding or offshore funding, we are not looking at the complexity structure of taking security or at all. Yeah, actually, purely we would prefer a parent bank corporate guarantee, which is more straightforward. At least from Taiwanese bank perspective like us. That's what I think somehow actually lack risk concern to some extent. But of course, this was, I think commercially it was try the pricing bucket a bit, right? So that's for manufacturing, for renewable energy, and okay, we are talking more. Okay, maybe I don't think we do have more time to talk more detail about the renewable energies here in Vietnam. Of course, Taiwanese, as a Taiwanese bank, CGB is the pioneer in Taiwan as the ESG leader. Here we are exploring so many financing opportunity here linked to ESG renewable energy, but I think it is quite complexity and quite complicated, not just in terms of structure, but also in terms of assets. It's not quite the same like real estate sector, but it's I think more way more than that. Either legal perspective, credit risk management perspective, or like profitability in the long run.
You make a good point, Tui, on the presence of a guarantee from a foreign parent. One theme that emerged when we were discussing the substance of this panel before was how there's actually still many parent-backed guaranteed deals, and pricing on it obviously has an impact, but it's still something that banks like to see aging.
Yeah, I think for sure, right? Ultimately, I think if it doesn't even necessarily have to be banks that are new to the Vietnam market. I think if you are doing it regularly and you've always had a parent guarantee, then you'll continue to want parent guarantee. And yeah, I think, and maybe just to answer this last question, the earlier question on whether because there is not as much liquidity for moving from offshore into the real estate market, whether because of that we will see people step back and say maybe don't need to take hard assets as security. I doubt it. I think it's a sector thing. If the demand comes back and the supply is then happy to follow, we will get the same structures that we've had previously. And I think we'll talk about that as well. And yeah, so I don't think we will look at something where banks will suddenly say, okay, completely clean, right? They'll probably ask for something else, parent guarantee, for example, or 100% SPLC. That's not quite what we want to see, but may happen that way.
Thank you. We have 7 minutes for the third section, and that's probably not enough time. So I might jump around the page a little bit and talk about bridge to take out structures. Vijay, we've done a few together. What are your thoughts on the use of a bridge that is less than 1 year and that does not require SPV approvals, and then taking that out the long-term facility?
So whenever a borrower, approaches us with a very tight timeline to consummate an acquisition, and they're looking at raising acquisition finance through a bridge facility, the overarching issue is that acquisition financing, unfortunately, is not an established concept. And when I say that, if you look at various circulars, they are still not very clear. So it boils down to the risk appetite of that particular lender if they want to go ahead and provide a bridge to be taken out by long term, which requires SPV approval. The comfort needs to be derived from the sponsor, whether what happens if SPV approval doesn't come in on time or doesn't come in at all, what happens to the bridge? The bridge has to be repaid, right? So they should be, so I would not advocate doing bridge funding to non-recourse SPV structures wherein you have this legal risk wherein SPV approval may or may not come. So since we're talking about acquisition financing, would also like to touch upon the fact that there are structures which have been designed or developed by, together with councils, wherein an acquisition can be done in a structure format, which is again not tested by a lot of acquirers, but the regulatory regime kind of gives the flexibility to the acquirer or the borrower to test that. A lot of times, borrowers from Singapore do ask this question, can I set up an SPV, or I have an SPV in Singapore, can this company borrow? The answer is both yes and no, given, if the lender is deriving comfort from immovable asset onshore, then if you're lending to a company in Singapore, you can't touch the asset in Vietnam. It cannot take security, unless, of course, you can go and get Prime Minister's approval. Don't think anybody would be wanting to do. So, which is why, there are, but nonetheless, acquisition financing transactions do happen in Vietnam. Each transaction has its own nuance and needs to be designed carefully. A lot of times, we do know that borrowers do work in consultation with SPV. They do consult and check with them whether the structure is sound and can go through. A lot of time is required in structuring the deal initially, wherein we do spend hours and days and weeks and months at times with the legal counsel as well as with the borrower. So unlike any other jurisdiction, if you're doing a transaction chart on a board, you can connect two boxes. In Vietnam, unfortunately, you cannot do that without doing the proper thinking.
Thanks, Vijay. Tui, on the legal side, acquisition financing, any views?
Yeah, I think on the legal side, it's quite common that if the borrower wants to look for the short-term funding, yes, of course, they would refer a bridge loan because they think, okay, SPV approval is not required for a short-term loan. Yeah, I think from my experience working in banks a few years recently, I don't see any our clients have been facing any challenge from SPV on the loan purpose being paybacks related purpose. That's for the first one. But anyway, registration requirements not required. That is not there, but still we have monthly reporting obligation. So of course, we will always steer our clients that you should clearly set out all the business activity, business line, investment projects, all in your loan utilization plan, and you need to strictly comply with such plan. Any change to such plan should be properly documented and explained to the SPV. That's the way we do in terms of documentation and from legal perspective. It's maybe okay. Our business guys sometimes they feel like okay, it's just short term, no SPV approval at all, no registration requirements. So of course. But anyway, from regulatory perspective, we do have some sort of internal rules to monitor our clients' use of loan process.
I think that was a theme that emerged from the last panel, is that there are attempts to lobby for regulatory change to liberalise the lending market and make it sort of facilitate more of these kind of structures. If we could pull up our final poll to play us out, the last poll question is, do you anticipate offshore lending activity increasing in 2025? And while we do this, I might ask for some concluding thoughts, maybe Mei Ching.
Well, I'm happy that the poll has put 100% at yes. So this is a positive sign for all of us in the room as well as on the panel. I think, yeah, it will. What percentage? I think the earlier poll, there was, I think, 10%, 30%. The vote was 10, so not super high, but I think last year was a recovery year. We did see improvements. I feel this year we should see more improvements, and there would be a more positive sort of push for that, because dollar interest rates, whilst it may not come down, it's not going to go up yet, anytime, at least for the next 12 months, hopefully. So we're at the highest. There's only upside in terms of it coming down. So yeah, I'm positive.
Great. BJ, any closing thoughts?
I think, if you look at where VND is right now, it's already depreciating to 25,000. And if USD rates, rate cuts are between 0 to 2 times, VND rate has to go up in the second half of this year unless the government is prepared for VND to depreciate more. With that in context, the offshore lending or offshore borrowing activity certainly has to go up. There's no doubt about it.
Thanks, Tweet.
You want me to add on this point from legal perspective? I don't think so. I think overall, I think yes. Fortunately, all the people, almost the people here, are quite optimistic. But I myself, as a legal person and an in-house counsel, especially the underside in-house counsel, I tend to be quite conservative in terms of risk management. Okay, you guys, business guys, you can be optimistic. But I need to look far more than that in terms of enforcement. Say one day if I'm gonna take legal action against our clients. Okay, maybe today is good, but later, who knows?
Okay, Abhishek, are you going to bring it back some optimism after Tweet?
I think when the mic was with Mei Ching, it was a resounding 100%. By the time it came to me, it is dropped down to 75. But I think I'm 100% optimistic about 2025, looking at much better year than what it was last year. And for the reasons mentioned, right, I think there are opportunities coming in terms of growth in the domestic market. The liquidity situation with the offshore banks, like investors and banks which are looking to deploy that liquidity, that continues to be very strong in most part of the investor pockets. We also see that not just Taiwanese banks, which are a big group of lenders to Vietnamese borrowers, but other pockets of liquidity are also coming up in a big way. Indian banks, Middle Eastern banks, they are taking more interest in this market. So hopefully 2025 is a resounding 100% growth.
Awesome. We actually have a lot more content, but we're out of time, but please come to us and chat about that extra content. And please thank the panelists for being so great today. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. What a great way to finish. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Abhishek. What I've learned when making closing remarks, particularly when drinks are to be served outside in a few minutes, is how important it is to be brief. So I will do nothing else but be brief, but I did want to make a few remarks by way of closing comments. For today's event, as we often do, we opted for quality over quantity, and I hope you agree with that. We had three very distinguished speakers to begin with, and then two very rich and excellent panel discussions. What was really interesting about our three distinguished speakers, Mr. Min from the Vietnam Bank Association, and then Ms. Tong from State Bank of Vietnam, and Ms. Han from Standard Chartered Bank, is the three speakers had not shared their notes beforehand, but they were all remarkably consistent in terms of their upbeat remarks, sense of optimism. And I think that theme was pretty much largely continued throughout the two panel discussions. We all recognize 2024 was a challenging year, but when we talk about credit growth in 2025 of between 16 and 18%, and potential GDP growth of 8% in this year, we all have much to look forward to. And although Thuy's comments about enforcement challenges are well noted, that consistency certainly came through in terms of that sense of ambition for 2025. So really fantastic and very rich discussions. Now, it would be absolutely wrong of me not to conclude with a couple of words of thank you. For any event, there are multiple moving parts in terms of what contributes to success, but there are at least three that come to mind. Firstly, of course, we can't have an event without wonderful speakers, moderators, and panelists, and it goes without saying a huge amount of effort and work goes into preparing for an event like this, and we really, really do appreciate all the effort that goes into this. Secondly, no event like this can be carried out without terrific partners, and again, we would like to thank the Vietnam Bank Association and our friends at Norton Rose Fulbright for their partnership. It really makes a lot of difference. And then thirdly, again, what's the point of having an event if nobody turns up? So thank you to everybody in the room for being here today. As we said at the beginning, we hope you found the sessions informative and enjoyable. Right at the beginning, Ivy commented on the number of registrations, which was just under 200. 199 to be precise, and there were 195 attendees here today. So that's not a bad turnout rate, and we hope all of those of you are still here in the room now really enjoyed the sessions. So, on that note, I will conclude the conference. Please do stay for drinks. No session like this without be an opportunity to continue the network, continuing the dialogue and the great open discussion. So thank you again for being here, and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Sprinting onto the stage.